Chapter 232. Su Ting stepped forward and cupped his hands. What a coincidence, Zhou Daoyu is also here. He didn't give off the feeling of a heretic cultivator, but more like a righteous cultivator. Normally, evil cultivators would be surrounded by yin qi and their entire being would be lifeless. And these people were injured by the yin qi, so they were more or less reclusive and ruthless. And the spirit power fluctuation on Su Ting's body also carried a trace of yin qi, but it gave off a very cheerful feeling. If he was really a kind person, the possibility of surviving in this place was not high. This Su Ting was very likely a smiling tiger. Then this kid was trying to worm his way into being friends with him. It was very likely that he was interested in his cultivation method. Wang Daoyuan smiled and said, I'm just here to buy some materials. Zhou Daoyu is also here to buy materials? Su Ting also answered, No, I'm here to buy a refining inheritance. Cultivation is difficult and I can only rely on hunting and gathering. I don't have enough resources, so I want to learn refining. The 100 Arts Pavilion did have pill refining, and talisman array inheritances for sale, but at most, it was second-tier upper grade. It was already useless to Wang Daoyuan. Wang Daoyuan cupped his hands and said, Then Dao, you can go ahead. I'll go find some other materials. Goodbye. Su Ting nodded and walked into the 100 Arts Pavilion. Wang Daoyuan looked at a few refining materials, but they were all bones and so on. He was really not interested. After walking around, he left the 100 Arts Pavilion. Next, he had to find a place to stay. Because the plan to obtain pure yin qi had to be postponed, he still needed to stay in the profound yin market for a while. He originally thought that he could easily obtain pure yin qi in the profound yin spring. As long as he forged a few more artifacts to store yin qi and stored enough yin qi, he could make the inky jade lotus bloom and bear seeds. Unfortunately, things did not go as he wished. The yin qi gushing out of the profound yin spring was not pure, but mixed with a large amount of yin qi. He let his clone try to use the extracted yin qi to cultivate the inky jade lotus. The inky jade lotus grew a flower bud, but it withered very quickly. The place where the yin qi was extracted was only 100 feet away from the profound yin spring, and there was no water from other places in the middle. Therefore, the profound yin spring did not produce pure yin qi in the first place. The baleful yin qi was formed by a mixture of yin qi and baleful qi. Since the two were fused together, it was impossible to separate them using normal methods. The evil cultivators' techniques had always been about adding evil qi, yin qi, and other things to their spiritual power. They had never considered how to obtain pure yin qi. If he wanted to obtain pure yin qi, he would have to think of other ways. According to 5 Element Sages' records in Beiyuan, Hell Valley was 1,000 zhang deep. More than 50,000 feet below the bottom of the valley, there was the Gui water nether spring that was gushing with pure yin qi. He had personally gone to the place where the Gui water nether spring was located to observe and record that the density of the Gui water nether spring's yin qi was comparable to a rank 5 spirit vein and spirit eye. The spring water in the Gui water nether spring flowed from the north and south. The northern stream formed Hell Valley, while the southern stream formed an underground river that flowed south through Wild Goose Mountain. After the underground river passed through many obstacles and flowed out of the ground, it became the Mingshui River. In the territory of the Underworld sect, the Underworld River was very famous. The Underworld sect's mountain gate was on the banks of the Mingshui River. The Mingshui River's water contained dense yin qi. The Underworld sect relied on the Mingshui River's yin qi to become one of the 3 great sects of the Zhao Empire. The Mingshui River's yin qi was much purer than the profound yin springs. Although it wasn't pure yin qi, it was still stronger than the profound yin river's evil qi. Using it to feed the inky jade lotus shouldn't be a problem. A pity that the Mingshui River's yin qi was sucked away by the Underworld sect's array and used for their disciples' cultivation. After flowing past the Underworld sect's mountain gate, there wasn't much yin qi left in the Mingshui River. The chances of getting yin qi from the Mingshui River weren't high. 5 Element Sage was from tens of thousands of years ago, so the Gui water nether spring's yin qi should be far weaker than before. But since the profound yin river's yin qi was still so strong, the Gui water nether spring should still be there. The Gui water nether spring was more than 50,000 feet below Hell Valley. Hell Valley was now a flat plain. The Gui water nether spring was more than 60,000 feet below ground. At this depth, even a golden core cultivator wouldn't be able to withstand the pressure of the earth. He was only a foundation establishment cultivator, so even if he used the earth escape art, he would only be able to go 400 to 500 feet below ground. Any deeper and his body wouldn't be able to withstand the pressure of the earth. In the past, 5 Elements Sage didn't use the earth escape art to go down. He wanted to find the source of the yin qi, so he went through the underground rivers and underground caves. He didn't know how many times he tried before he found the correct route to the Gui Water Nether Spring. Unfortunately, the Beiyuan records didn't record his route back then. Even if it was recorded, it wouldn't be of much use. After all, tens of thousands of years had passed and the route back then was likely broken. But 5 Elements Sage's method provided him with a reference. He could also use 5 Elements Sage's method to go to the Gui Water Nether Spring. Finding the underground rivers and caves wasn't hard. In the cultivation world, finding mines, spirit veins, underground rivers and other methods was an array master's specialty. Wang Daoyuan was a second-tier upper-grade array master, so it wasn't particularly difficult for him to find the underground rivers and caves. The main difficulty was to find a suitable passage. Going straight down the water was no different from courting death. If the earth escape art was too deep, the body would be under a lot of pressure, and the same was true for the water escape art. It was just that the pressure on the water escape art was a bit higher. In Wang Daoyuan's case, the depth of the water escape art couldn't exceed 150 feet. If he didn't want to be crushed to death by the water or the earth, he had to arrange the route. In addition to the route, there was also the problem of the yin qi. When he entered the cold water river, he was frozen by the yin qi in the river. The place near the Gui Water Nether Spring was even colder. In the Beiyuan records, it was also recorded that the surroundings of the Gui Water Nether Spring were extremely cold. Even 5 Elements Sage, a Jindan cultivator, could feel a trace of coldness. He also had to prepare magic tools that could resist the cold. Otherwise, even if he successfully found the Gui Water Nether Spring, he might be frozen to death. These weren't things that could be done overnight. He might need to stay here for a few years or even longer before he could solve the problem of the route and cold resistance. If it was just to find the pure yin qi, there was actually no need to go to the location of the Gui Water Nether Spring. He just needed to find the north and south water veins of the spring. But in the Gui Water Nether Spring, there might be a treasure that he urgently needed. That was the water attribute spiritual item needed to cultivate the 5 spirit immortal art. When 5 Elements Sage explored the Gui Water Nether Spring, it was to find a water attribute spiritual item to condense a water attribute spiritual power seed. When he found the Gui Water Nether Spring, he didn't find a suitable spiritual item. Generally, after a long time, a spirit spring would condense a special water attribute spiritual item. But the Gui Water Nether Spring was formed relatively late. When 5 Elements Sage found it, it hadn't condensed a spiritual item. 5 Elements Sage estimated that it would take at least 20,000 years to form a water attribute spiritual item in the Gui Water Nether Spring. Now 50 to 60,000 years had passed since 5 Elements Sage's era. The spiritual item in the Gui Water Nether Spring should have already taken shape. Gui water belonged to yin water and the spring water was rich in yin qi. The place where the Gui Water Nether Spring was located was extreme yin, and extreme yin gave birth to yang. According to 5 Elements Sage's speculation, in the Gui Water Nether Spring, there might be a water attribute spiritual fire. For the cultivator who cultivated the 5 Elements immortal art, the 5 Elements spiritual fire was the most precious treasure. With the hope of getting the water attribute spiritual fire, what was the point of spending some time? 10 to 20 years of time was still something they could afford. There was nothing for him to solve in the family for the time being. It would take a long time for the Zhou family to make trouble. At present he still had plenty of time. He simply stayed in the Xianxia market and planned the Gui Water Nether Spring. Chapter 233. If he was only looking for pure yin qi, there was another option. That was the place Qiyun had previously explored, the place where the 10,000 corpse Taoist had passed away. According to Qiyun's memory, it was a secret realm with yin qi lingering inside, and there was also a lot of pure yin qi. However, Qinji knew that the place where spiritual corpse master died, and Qiyun's old rival Qinji, might have left something nearby. If he went there rashly, he might be discovered. At that time he would be facing a peak foundation establishment cultivator or even a Zifu realm cultivator. With his current strength, he had no hope of winning against a righteous cultivator at the 7th level of the foundation establishment realm. To deal with evil cultivators, he could rely on the restraining effect of the earth divine thunder and barely fight. If he was facing a peak foundation establishment cultivator, the success rate of escaping was not high. If Qinji opened the Zifu realm, he would not even have a chance to escape. Although it was a little dangerous to look for the Gui water nether spring, it was all controllable. He could withdraw at any time and did not have to face a strong enemy. The matter of the Gui water nether spring could not be solved overnight. Now he had to find a place to stay. There were not many shops in the Xianin market, but the area was very large, so there was a lot of space to open a cave residence. The entire Xianin market was built between mountains, and there were many cave residences near the mountains. These cave residences were owned by the higher-ups of the Xianin market, and rogue cultivators could buy or rent them. The center of the Xianin market was the management organization of the whole market. To rent a cave residence, one only needed to go to the center and choose a suitable one. The manager of the cave residence rental was an old peak qi refining cultivator. When Wang Daoyuan came here, the old cultivator asked respectfully, "Senior, the cave residences in the Xianin market can be rented or bought. Do you want to rent or buy a cave residence?" Wang Daoyuan replied, "Just rent one." The old cultivator persuaded, "Senior, the Xianin market is recruiting foundation establishment cultivators to form a defensive force called the Xianin Guard. There are 4 elixirs, weapons and talisman arrays. If one of them can reach the 2nd level of lower grade, he can become a guest of the Xianin market. Whether he joins the Xianin Guard or becomes a guest, he can get a cave residence for free. Senior, do you have this intention?" He was just staying here temporarily and had no interest in these trivial matters. He replied, "I'm just staying in the Xianin market temporarily. I have other affairs to attend to in the future, so I can't stay for long." The old cultivator's face was filled with regret. Just as he was about to say something, he glanced outside and immediately cupped his hands. "Young master, you've arrived." Wang Daoyuan looked outside and saw a 7th-level foundation establishment cultivator in a white robe walking in. This person also looked like a young man, and Wang Daoyuan recognized him. The newcomer was none other than the 7th-level foundation establishment cultivator who had stopped the evil cultivator when they had first arrived at the Profound Yin Spring. At that time, Wang Daoyuan only greeted him and did not look closely at his appearance. After all, they weren't familiar with each other, so it wasn't polite to stare at others. At this moment, he was so shocked by this face that he broke out in a cold sweat. It wasn't that this person's appearance was scary, it was just that this person's appearance was too familiar. Wang Daoyuan saw the shadows of 2 people on this person's face. They were Zhao Liang and Shi Xinghua. His appearance was somewhat similar to both Zhao Liang and Shi Xinghua, so he might be related to them by blood. This person's identity was obvious. He was a descendant of the 9th prince. This person walked into the room with steady footsteps. This time, Wang Daoyuan was even more certain of this person's identity. After all, the Wang family was once a noble family of the state of Zhao, so they knew quite a lot about the rules of the state of Zhao. At that time, the nobles and officials all walked with the official gait. Wandering cultivators and sect disciples were particular about being unrestrained and unrestrained, so they didn't walk like this. Wang Daoyuan was very surprised, but his expression didn't change. He cupped his hands and said, "Thank you, Daoyu, for helping me out at the Profound Yin Spring. This one is Zhou Ming. May I know Daoyu's name?" The person glanced at Wang Daoyuan and pondered for a moment before saying, "You're the fellow Taoist who cast a dermic art without a single trace of malevolent aura and was corrosive the other day. Even if I didn't say anything, that person was no match for you. He doesn't deserve this gratitude. My name is Zhao Qi. My father is the founder of the Profound Yin Market. Daoyu's strength is extraordinary. Are you interested in joining the Profound Yin Guard?" Sure enough, the people of the 9th prince's line were smarter. They were more secretive in their recruitment. Here they could prepare 200 years in advance. Compared to the 6th prince's line, they were much better. Although the 9th prince's line was reliable and the ancestor also followed the 9th prince to war, now was not the time to get involved in these things. He cupped his hands and said, "I'm used to being idle and don't like to be tied down. Please forgive me, young Master Zhao." Zhao Qi waved his hand and said with a smile, "It doesn't matter. The Profound Yin Market recruits on a voluntary basis. Since Daoyu doesn't want to, it's fine." Saying so, he turned to the old cultivator and said, "Give this fellow Dao Seeker Zhou a first-rate cave dwelling for free." The old cultivator nodded in agreement. Wang Daoyuan quickly refused. I don't deserve it. I don't dare to accept such a big gift. Zhao Qi said with a smile. Daoyu and I hit it off. A mere cave residence is not a big gift. I have something else to do. I won't keep you company. Then without waiting for Wang Daoyuan's reply, he walked out of the house. The old cultivator took out a piece of animal skin. On the animal skin, the layout of the profound Yin market was drawn. He pointed to one of the cave residences and said, Senior, what do you think of this cave residence? The cave residence he pointed to was not far from the center of the market. It was not as noisy as the center of the market, nor was it deserted because of its remote location. Wang Daoyuan was also helpless. Zhao Qi had already left. It was useless to refuse a servant. He could only stay here for now. The ancestor of the Wang family killed 5 golden core cultivators for the Zhao family. He could be said to be the first hero in the war between the Zhao family and the 3 sections. In order to protect the Zhao family, many cultivators of the Wang family died in battle. It was nothing for Wang Daoyuan to take a cave residence for free. He nodded his head in agreement. The old cultivator handed him a token and said, Senior, this is the token for the cave residence's array formation. Wang Daoyuan took the token and turned to leave the house, heading for the cave residence. Following the location on the map, he arrived at the entrance of the cave residence. The cave residence occupied a small hill and occupied more than 10 mu of land. On the west side of the hill, there was a grade 1 spirit spring with a few ornamental spirit fishes in the spring water. The entrance of the cave residence was on the east side of the hill and there were some precious ornamental spirit plants planted in front of the door. Using the token to close the cave residence's defensive array formation, he walked into the cave residence. He pushed open the door and entered the cave residence. The interior of the cave residence was not small, occupying about half a mu of land. The tables, chairs, stools, bookshelves, beds and so on were all made of grade 2 spirit wood. The teacups, teapots and other utensils were mostly made of grade 2 jade stones. The Zhao family had really put in a lot of effort to recruit talents. He checked the interior and exterior of the cave residence but did not find any eavesdropping or surveillance array formations. In the following days, Wang Daoyuan cultivated in the cave residence. To go out and search for underground rivers and caves, he would need a special dermic weapon, the spirit-seeking compass. This item was very similar to the formation measuring compass. In fact, it was a special kind of formation measuring compass. After the formation measuring compass was improved, its ability to find formation eyes and flaws was weaker. However, its ability to detect spirit veins and underground rivers was improved. The requirements for materials for this item were not high, but it had high requirements for weapon refinement skills. If one did not know about formations, they would not be able to create such an dermic weapon with just weapon refinement skills. However, Wang Daoyuan was proficient in formations and his clone Bai Xing was proficient in weapon refinement. It was not a problem for them to create an inferior grade 2 spirit-seeking compass. Chapter 234. Wang Daoyuan had been cultivating in the cave for more than half a year. During this time his cultivation had improved slightly. However, there was still some distance to go before he could break through to the 4th level of the Foundation Establishment realm. In the past half a year, Bai Sheng's clone had refined all the mystic Yin jade into storage Dharma artifacts. He had refined more than 30 of them. In order to fool others, they were all in the shape of mystic Yin jade gourds. He also often went to the mystic Yin spring to collect Yin Qi to nourish the Tiger Soul banner. After all, he still needed to use the Tiger Soul banner as a cover to search for underground rivers in the future. After half a year of nourishment, the Tiger Soul had completely recovered. The entire Dharma artifact had also regained its former power. Bai Sheng's refining skills had also returned to 2nd level inferior grade, and he had successfully refined the spirit-seeking compass. This spirit-seeking compass was only the size of an adult's palm. It looked a bit like a compass, but it didn't have a pointer. The surface of the compass was also very simple, with only the carvings of the 5 elements divine beasts. After the spirit-seeking compass was activated, the 5 elements divine beast patterns could sense spirit chi of the corresponding attribute. There were 9 star positions in each divine beast pattern. If there was a spirit vein nearby, a star position would light up. If there was an inferior grade 1st level spirit vein, only one star position would light up. If there was an intermediate grade first level spirit vein, 2 would light up. If there was an upper grade third level spirit vein, all 9 star positions would light up. After all, it was only an inferior grade second level Dharma artifact. It couldn't determine the grade of a higher grade spirit vein. If the spirit-seeking compass was of a higher grade, it could add a few more star positions to determine a higher grade spirit vein. The entire spirit-seeking compass was divided into 2 layers. The upper layer could be rotated at will. If there was a water attribute spirit vein, the upper layer would rotate, and the black tortoise pattern would point in the direction of the spirit vein and release a beam of spirit chi toward the spirit vein. If there was a non-attribute spirit vein, the upper layer wouldn't rotate. The star positions in the 5 divine beast patterns would light up and release spirit chi beams at the same time. They would merge together and fly toward the spirit vein. This method only worked when there was a spirit vein. It was more passive. In addition to the passive method of searching for spirit veins, it could also directly control the chi testing compass to release spirit chi beams. Through the compass, the spirit chi beams could detect whether there were spirit veins in an area. Through the spirit chi beams, the spirit veins' surroundings. This way, when searching for underground spirit veins, no one would need to go down personally. The spirit-seeking compass was a special kind of array measuring compass. It also retained the function of finding the array eye and the flaws of array formations. However, compared to the formation measuring disk, its effect was much weaker. The speed at which it could find the formation eye and the flaws of the formation was much slower than the formation measuring disk of the same grade. There were several hundred kilograms of soul-binding silk stored in the space, and it wasn't good to sell it. Since he didn't know how to refine weapons, he could only find a storage bag and put it inside. Now that he had a weapon refiner clone, he naturally had to make good use of it. Bai Xing used the soul-sealing silkworm silk to refine 2 low-grade Tier 2 cloaks. Although these cloaks were Tier 2 magic artifacts, they were not spirit armor-type magic artifacts. Its defensive function was about the same as a high-grade Tier 1 magic artifact. Its main function was to avoid the detection of divine sense. Back then, Blood Shadow assassin Wu Yi had ambushed him at Black Rock Peak. Wu Yi's cloak had only been refined with a few tails of soul-bind silk. Even when Wang Daoyuan used the heaven-peering technique, he couldn't detect him from more than 10 feet away. Wang Daoyuan's 2 cloaks were both made with 3 layers of soul-bind silk. They weighed about 4 to 5 kilograms without any other materials. A Zifu realm cultivator's soul had transformed into a divine soul, and the strength of their divine sense had greatly increased. It was hard to say whether this soul-bind cloak could avoid the detection of a Zifu realm cultivator, but it was impossible for a Foundation establishment cultivator to detect it. He closed his eyes and used the heaven-peering technique. Even if the soul-bind cloak was in front of him, he wouldn't be able to detect it. Even a Peak Foundation establishment cultivator wouldn't be able to detect it if they didn't have an extremely powerful divine sense detection technique. When he went out, if he encountered a late-stage Foundation establishment cultivator or a high-grade Tier 2 demon beast, he could just put on the soul-bind cloak and use the earth escape technique. It would be very easy to escape. With everything ready, Wang Daoyuan left the cave and headed to the northern foot of Mount Huiyan to find the underground river. He changed into Du Heng's outfit, which was a loose black robe and a black cloak that could cover his head. Heretic cultivators cultivated with evil yin qi which damaged their bodies. Usually their faces were ugly. Therefore, most heretic cultivators didn't like to show their true faces. His clothes were also common among heretic cultivators, so it wouldn't attract attention. After leaving the Xianin market, he flew towards the south with the Tiger Soul banner. The Xianin market was only about 2,000 miles away from the northern foot of Mount Huiyan. It only took him a little more than 2 hours to reach the northern foot of Mount Huiyan. This time his target was the 9 Springs Ridge. The 9 Springs Ridge was located at the northern edge of Mount Huiyan. 9 mountains were connected. On each mountain, there was a spiritual spring, which was why it was called the 9 Springs Ridge. Since there were so many spiritual springs here, there must be underground water veins. Moreover, the 9 Springs Ridge was located between the Xianin Spring and the Underworld sect. It shouldn't be far from the underground river upstream of the Darkwater River. He came to the middle mountain of the 9 Springs Ridge and took out the spirit-seeking compass. He was looking for the underground river, which could also be regarded as a water spiritual vein. He used his spiritual power to drive the black tortoise pattern on the spirit-seeking compass. The black tortoise pattern immediately spat out a beam of water spiritual power. Wang Daoyuan used the spirit testing compass to control the direction of the beam of spiritual power. Under his control, the beam of spiritual power went into the underground water veins from the spiritual spring. The beam of spiritual power went down along the water veins. After 500 feet it reached its limit. If it went any deeper, the beam of spiritual power would lose contact with the spirit-seeking compass. Without the spirit-seeking compass to continue supplying spiritual power, the beam of spiritual power would soon be annihilated. Moreover, the water veins under this spiritual spring were extremely narrow. The spring water was squeezed out from the cracks in the rocks. Cultivators couldn't pass through this kind of water veins. If this water vein didn't work, he would try another mountain. Just as he was about to leave the mountain, he heard someone calling for help at the foot of the mountain. He took a closer look and found that it was Su Ting. Behind Su Ting was a huge wild boar that was 60 to 70 feet long. This wild boar was at the beginning of the second rank, which was equivalent to a human cultivator at the 4th level of foundation establishment. Evil cultivators were natural enemies of demon beasts. Su Ting was at the 3rd level of foundation establishment. It shouldn't be a problem for him to beat a wild boar with a slightly higher cultivation. Besides, the wild boar was a terrestrial demon beast and couldn't fly. If he couldn't beat it, he could just fly away on his artifact. What was the meaning of racing with the wild boar on the ground? Wang Daoyuan couldn't be bothered to care about Su Ting's life or death. He had only seen him twice and exchanged a few words with him. Why would he care about him? Seeing Su Ting rush up, he immediately controlled the Tiger Soul Yin Fiend banner and was about to fly away. At this moment, a huge bird with a wingspan of more than 10 feet suddenly flew down from the sky. Its cultivation was at the 2nd rank, which was not far from the 2nd rank, which was equivalent to a cultivator at the 6th level of foundation establishment. Now he knew why Su Ting was racing with the wild boar. For Su Ting, with such a huge bird in the sky, flying on his artifact was not much different from suicide. It was safer to play with the wild boar. He wasn't very strong, but he was quite good at causing trouble. He was surrounded by 2 2nd-rank demon beasts in the air and on the ground. Compared to a 2nd-rank demon beast, a foundation establishment cultivator's sword kinesis speed was far inferior. If he fought it head-on in the air, Wang Daoyuan wasn't confident that he could kill it even if he took out his trump card. On the lone mountain he couldn't leave with earth escape. At most he could escape to a depth of a few hundred feet. Surrounded by cliffs, he was even more passive than on the top of the mountain. Flying on artifacts and earth escape were both unreliable. The best choice was to kill or repel the wild boar and walk down the mountain. After reaching the surface, he could escape through earth escape. That huge bird couldn't do anything to him. Chapter 235. Wang Daoyuan held the Tiger Soul Dark Fiend banner and leaped down the mountain. Then he met up with Su Ting. He wanted to go around the wild boar and run down the mountain. Su Ting shouted, "Daoyu, save me," and jumped behind him. The wild boar crashed towards him. This kid wanted to divert the trouble. Wang Daoyuan really had the urge to kill him. If he chose to dodge, it would be a little difficult if he did not use the cloud mist escape. Unless it was a last resort, he could not expose his family's Dharma spells. Wang Daoyuan activated the Tiger Soul Dark Fiend banner. The Dark Fiend chi on the banner condensed into a black ball. The black ball quickly turned into a black tiger and pounced towards the wild boar. The black tiger formed by the Tiger Soul and the Dark Fiend chi was much smaller than the wild boar. If he really fought the wild boar to the death, he would not be able to gain an advantage in a short time. However, relying on the corrosion of the Dark Fiend chi, as long as the Dark Fiend chi was not exhausted, the black tiger would definitely win over time. Wang Daoyuan was afraid that the wild boar would charge at him recklessly. He had already used the swift art and dodged to the side. When the wild boar saw the black tiger, it became timid before the battle and did not dare to charge forward. The black tiger pounced forward and started biting the wild boar. Su Ting also took out a flying sword. Wang Daoyuan thought that he was going to attack the wild boar. He did not expect that this kid's sword would attack him. At this moment, Wang Daoyuan had just landed. If he did not use the cloud mist escape, it would be impossible for him to dodge. Su Ting's Dharma weapon sword was of the metal attribute. The Tiger Soul Dark Fiend banner in his hand relied entirely on the Tiger Soul. Now that the Tiger Soul was fighting with the Wild Boar, the Tiger Soul Dark Fiend banner could not withstand a single blow. If it was used to block the flying sword, it would probably be crippled in one strike. Wang Daoyuan took out an inferior grade 2 white bone sword from the space. This was obtained from Bai Sheng. Moreover, this white bone sword was not forged by Bai Sheng himself. He had obtained it by killing someone and robbing it. This bone sword did not recognize an owner, so he could not use the sword control technique or borrow a sword to cast spells, so it could not exert much power. However, this was a second-grade low-grade offensive and defensive magic tool after all, and its strength wasn't low. It wasn't a problem to use it to forcefully receive Su Ting's flying sword. Su Ting's flying sword flew over. Holding the sword with one hand, he poured a large amount of spirit energy into the bone sword and slashed at the flying sword. The flying sword fell to the ground and a gap appeared on the blade. There was also a sword mark on the bone sword. Wang Daoyuan did not take this bone sword seriously, and planned to sell it for spirit stones in the future. Su Ting's heart ached. His most commonly used flying sword was damaged and he would have to spend a lot of spirit stones to repair it. Wang Daoyuan sneered and said, "You dare to be a treasure-seizing cultivator with such little ability?" Before he could finish speaking, an arrogant voice rang out. "He's not qualified to be a treasure-seizing cultivator. You're not qualified either." Wang Daoyuan looked up and saw the ferocious bird in the sky flying over. As it got closer, Wang Daoyuan realized that there was a cultivator on the back of the bird, and his cultivation was at the 7th level of foundation establishment. This person was tall and strong, unlike other evil cultivators who looked like they were just a few more breaths than a dead person. This situation meant that this person's cultivation technique was extremely brilliant. He did not rely much on the evil aura and his body was less eroded. This person also looked young and he had the time to change his cultivation technique. It seemed that he had set his eyes on Lin Fan's cultivation technique. When the bird landed, Wang Daoyuan scanned it with his spirit consciousness and realized that it was a bone vulture. A bone vulture could grow to 2nd grade high grade at most. Unlike other vultures that ate rotten meat, this fellow liked to eat bones. The bone vulture was also a demon bird with an extremely strong physical body, and it was not trash like the black-feathered eagle. An adult bone vulture's feathers were like flying swords and its bones were like metal. It had no problem withstanding the flying swords of cultivators of the same level. The young cultivator jumped down from the back of the bone vulture and smiled. "You're really capable. You hooked up with Xiao Qi as soon as you arrived and I didn't dare to make a move against you in the market. Unfortunately, you recklessly left the market. You can't blame me for this." Wang Daoyuan's heart sank. This was a strong opponent. Even if he used all his means, he was not confident in defeating the person in front of him, not to mention that there was a bone vulture that was about to reach 2nd grade high grade. As for the two trash like the Wild Boar and Su Ting, they were not in his consideration at all. He did not show it on his face and asked, "Daoyu's cultivation technique is also extraordinary. Why do you have to spend so much effort to steal my cultivation technique?" The young cultivator smiled. "I naturally don't need it, but my subordinates do. Your cultivation technique has no evil aura, and the spells you use have corrosive properties. It's extremely attractive to rogue cultivators. If you use it as a signboard to attract rogue cultivators to join you and strengthen your strength, it's also very valuable." Wang Daoyuan thought that some people snatched the cultivation technique to cultivate themselves, and some people snatched it to sell it for money. But he did not expect that someone would snatch it as a signboard to attract rogue cultivators. He asked, "So, Daoyu is also a powerful figure in the Xianin market? Is your surname also Zhao?" The young cultivator replied, "Of course not. My surname is Wu. The Xianin market is not dominated by the Zhao family. My grandfather is also one of the founders of the market." Wang Daoyuan was a little confused about who this guy was. Among the top nobles of the Zhao state, the Wu family was indeed one of them. Moreover, the Wu family was the strongest family in Linchuan County. The Wu family of Linchuan was also an old noble family, but its power was not as powerful as that of the Shi family of Heiyang. It was only a marquis, but it occupied 1/3 of the territory of Linchuan County. Although he did not officially become Zhao Qi's subordinate, he accepted the cave residence given by Zhao Qi. In the eyes of outsiders, he was also Zhao Qi's subordinate. But if this guy was from the Wu family of Linchuan, he should not be against the Zhao family. It seemed that the upper class of the Xianin market was not all the ninth prince's men. This guy surnamed Wu should not be a member of the Wu family of Linchuan. His grandfather might just be a rogue cultivator who did not know the purpose of the Zhao family to establish the Xianin market, so he joined in the confusion. The identity of this person had nothing to do with him. If the Xianin market wanted to cause trouble, it would be a sneak attack on the mountain gate of the ghost sect, which would not affect the Wang family. The problem now was how to escape. Although the bone vulture was not good at speed, it was still faster than other second-rank demonic birds. No matter how slow a second-rank demonic bird was, it was still much faster than a Foundation establishment cultivator riding on a sword. If he ran down the mountain and performed the earth escaping skill and used the forbidden cloak, he might be able to escape. In the face of a 7th-level Foundation establishment cultivator, it was meaningless to rely on evil means. He put away the Tiger Soul Dark Ghost banner and took out the golden edge sword he took from Li Qingchuan. In addition, he also took out more than 100 second-rank upper-grade talismans and stuck 5 earth armor talismans on himself. The cultivator surnamed Wu was unmoved, but Su Ting's eyes lit up when he saw his magic tools and talismans. Wang Daoyuan threw 5 fire python talismans to the cultivator surnamed Wu and the bone vulture. The 5 fire python talismans flew toward the man and the bird. The other 2 would not just stand there and watch. They immediately performed their best spells to attack him. Then he performed the sand flying spell, covering the whole mountain in sand and dust. The cultivator surnamed Wu was a metal attribute cultivator, not a wind attribute cultivator, so it was impossible for him to break such a large range of flying sand in an instant. After breaking 2 fire python talismans with a flying sword, the cultivator surnamed Wu continued to attack Wang Daoyuan. Su Ting performed the golden saber technique, which was not powerful enough. The wild boar did not use any long-range attack magic but just bumped into him. Wang Daoyuan was beaten up, but he did not dare to use the cloud escaping skill, fearing that his identity would be exposed. He could only use the 5 earth armor talismans to resist. The other party could not break through the 5 layers of earth armor talismans in an instant. After using the sand flying spell, he immediately used the golden edge sword to escape. The wild boar's charge missed. Su Ting's attack hit the second-rank upper-grade earth armor talisman, but it did not have much effect. However, the cultivator surnamed Wu's flying sword was very powerful. After breaking 2 fire python talismans, it hit his body and broke through a layer of earth armor talisman. Only then did the sword's power completely dissipate. Fortunately, the bone vulture did not have any long-range attack magic and was also held back by the 3 fire pythons, so it could not attack. Otherwise, Wang Daoyuan would be under even more pressure. Chapter 236. After several breaths of time, the bone vulture destroyed the 3 fire pythons and carried the cultivator surnamed Wu away from the range of the sand flying technique. At this time, Wang Daoyuan had only escaped a little more than 100 feet away. For the bone vulture, this little distance was equivalent to the edge of its mouth. As long as it flapped its wings a few times, it would be able to catch up. Wang Daoyuan scattered more than 50 offensive talismans behind him and continued to escape without looking back. The bone vulture was speeding up and chasing after him. The distance of 200 feet was covered in an instant. Even if he saw the talismans, he wouldn't be able to dodge in time. He used his spiritual sense to detonate all the talismans. The cultivator surnamed Wu immediately ordered the bone vulture to turn around and dodge. He also controlled his flying sword to break the spell released by the talismans. The talismans had a very low hit rate when attacking flying targets. They couldn't be counted on to kill and could only act as a hindrance. The bone vulture flew high into the sky. Both the man and the vulture were unharmed. However, dodging the talismans wasted a lot of time. At this time, Wang Daoyuan had successfully reached the foot of the mountain. He put away his flying sword and landed in a place with lush vegetation. He took out a divine restriction cloak from the space and put it on. He immediately used the earth escape technique and escaped to a depth of 40 feet. Then he immediately fled east along the foot of the mountain. Although the divine restriction cloak couldn't be detected, that was under the condition that he didn't use any spells. When he used the earth escape technique, it was inevitable that there would be fluctuations of spiritual power. The divine restriction cloak couldn't completely hide them. Ordinary Foundation establishment cultivators wouldn't be able to detect these small fluctuations of spiritual power even if they were standing directly above him. However, if this cultivator surnamed Wu had a special method to find people, he might be able to detect it. Therefore, as soon as he entered the ground, he used all his strength to escape east. When the cultivator surnamed Wu landed on the ground on the bone vulture, Wang Daoyuan had already escaped more than 100 feet to the east. At such a long distance, separated by several hundred feet of earth and rocks, plus the divine restriction cloak, even a peak Foundation establishment cultivator wouldn't be able to detect him. The cultivator surnamed Wu searched the place where Wang Daoyuan disappeared for a long time but couldn't find him. The method to track the earth escape technique was not something that ordinary people could obtain. Naturally, he did not know how to do it. The cultivator surnamed Wu was flustered and exasperated. He cast a spell and attacked the place where Wang Daoyuan disappeared. After fighting for a long time, he finally returned to the Xianxia market, filled with rage. Wang Daoyuan, who was underground, was also trembling with fear. He was not sure whether that cultivator surnamed Wu had left or not. Only after traveling for over 200 miles to the east did he dare to use his divine sense to explore the area above him. Even if they were to penetrate more than 400 feet into the ground, they wouldn't be able to probe too far upwards. Seeing that there were no traces of the enemy, he was slightly relieved. However, he did not dare to go out rashly. He took out the spirit-seeking compass and activated it with his spiritual energy. The spirit-seeking compass released a beam of spiritual energy that scanned the surroundings, looking for a temporary shelter. At a depth of over 400 feet, he had traveled for over 200 miles. The huge pressure from the earth and rocks above him made him feel a little tired. Staying underground for a long time wasn't a solution either. Even if he had enough spiritual energy, his body wouldn't be able to bear it. The beam of spiritual energy released by the spirit-seeking compass quickly returned with good news. Through the spirit-testing compass, it was determined that there was an underground karst cave about 100 feet to the right. He immediately fled to the right and soon arrived at the karst cave. The concentration of spiritual energy here was comparable to that of a second-tier low-grade spiritual vein. There would be no high-level demonic beasts nearby. Wang Daoyuan was relieved. He could rest here for a while. After being stirred up by the cultivator surnamed Wu, it was not safe to return to the Xianxia market. However, he couldn't leave the Xianxia market. If he wanted to go to the Gui Water Nether Spring, he must have a treasure or magic weapon that could resist the yin qi. Otherwise, he would freeze to death if he went down. He had the refining inheritance left by the 5-element spiritual master. But after all, the 5-element spiritual master didn't specialize in refining, so he didn't have a deep understanding of various magic weapons. In his inheritance, there was no mention of magic weapons that could resist the yin qi. If he wanted to find a way to resist the yin qi, it was most reliable to inquire among the evil cultivators. After all, they relied on the yin qi to cultivate. They were professionals in resisting the erosion of yin qi. Besides, even if he knew how to refine this kind of magic weapon, he must have the refining level. The magic weapon that could resist the yin qi of the Gui Water Nether Spring was at least a 3rd-tier magic weapon. Bai Sheng's limit was a 2nd-tier mid-grade refining master. To reach the 3rd-tier refining master, he didn't have to worry about the inheritance. In the experience of the 5-element spiritual master, there was the inheritance of a 3rd-tier refining master. Refining was a cross-field craft that integrated refining, forging, and pattern. With Wang Daoyuan's level of elixir, talisman, and array, it was not difficult for him to get started with refining. But to upgrade to the 3rd tier, it would take many years of accumulation. To improve the refining level, he needed to consume various refining materials. Nearby, only the Xianxia market could buy a large number of refining materials. To find the route to the Gui Water Nether Spring, obtain the method to resist the yin qi, and buy refining materials, all of these needed to be in the Xianxia market. He rested for a while. After his body was fully recovered, he began to explore the karst cave. For safety's sake, he first released the soul-chasing bees to explore to see if there were any demonic beasts. After an hour, all the soul-chasing bees came back. There was no trace of demonic beasts in the karst cave. According to the report of the soul-chasing bees, this underground karst cave was extremely complicated and had many forks. They only flew out for more than 100 miles and encountered dozens of forks. It took them an hour to successfully return. The karst cave was eroded by the underground river. Where there was a karst cave, there must be an underground river. The underground river would constantly erode the mountain to form a karst cave. The water would flow downwards and the underground river would constantly erode downwards. Now the karst cave here was extremely dry without any sense of moisture, indicating that it was far from the underground river. In other words, the underground river at this time should still be very deep down. If this underground river could be as deep as the grey water nether spring, it would be easy. If the depth was enough, there was no need to find a way down. To go to the place where the grey water nether spring was located, the earth escape and the water escape were not reliable. The most reliable way was to dig a tunnel. He had thought of digging a tunnel before, but outside this trick did not work at all. First of all, to dig from the surface to the ground, he needed to dig through many rock layers. These rock layers were extremely hard. If he dug down more than 6,000 feet, he would not be able to see the grey water nether spring without digging for 180 years. There was also the problem of where to dig. In the northern part of the mountain, in addition to the industries of the major forces, there were treasure-snatching cultivators everywhere. Digging a tunnel was such a big movement. Would there not be treasure-snatching cultivators all day long to harass? This karst cave solved all the possible problems of digging a tunnel, and there was no need to consider digging through the rock layers. As long as the bottom of the karst cave was deep enough, starting from the karst cave, directly digging horizontally, encountering particularly hard rocks, it was completely bypassed and there was no need to gnaw hard on the hard rock layers. Not to mention the concealment, the top layer of the karst cave was hundreds of feet deep from the ground. The bottom layer of the karst cave, who knows how deep it was. Even if other cultivators found this karst cave, it was fine. There were many forks in the karst cave and ordinary cultivators did not dare to go deep. There was no need to worry about other cultivators disturbing the process of digging a tunnel. The only security threat was the demonic beasts in the underground karst cave. As long as there was no rank 3 demonic beast, the problem was not big and he could still escape. Chapter 237. In addition, a lot of refining materials could be found in the karst cave. Exploring and finding some materials could also improve his refining level. That Wu guy sent him to such a good place, he really didn't know whether to hate him or thank him. As for the problem of the many forks in the karst cave, that was not a problem. After Wang Daoyuan's cultivation base broke through to the foundation establishment stage, the ordinary soul-chasing bee honey was no longer of much use to him. He usually only ate some royal jelly, and this honey was kept as the rations of the soul-chasing bees. The population scale of the soul-chasing bees also expanded a lot. At present, the number of soul-chasing bees in the space of the spiritual pearl had exceeded 10,000. With the soul-chasing bees opening the way, no matter how many forks there were in the karst cave, it was nothing. From the space of the spiritual pearl, he released 1,000 soul-chasing bees, let them find the karst cave that extended downwards, and ordered them to return within 2 hours. After 2 hours, all the soul-chasing bees returned. Their results were also very impressive. They found 4 or 5 passages that extended downwards. Wang Daoyuan chose the northernmost passage, because the north was the direction of the grey water nether spring. To find a place to start digging, naturally the closer to the destination the better. With the soul-chasing bees exploring the way, he could always find a passage that continued downwards. However, he also encountered some trouble, that was, he couldn't determine the depth he was at. The underground karst cave was full of twists and turns. Descending a distance of 10 feet, he might have to walk through more than 10 forks. Walking and stopping, tossing and turning for more than 10 days, Wang Daoyuan really couldn't determine where he was and how deep underground he was. In desperation, he could only continue to go down. No matter how deep the karst cave was, there must be a bottom. When he reached the bottom of the karst cave, it would not be too late to determine the depth. After another 5 or 6 days, he felt a trace of fire spiritual energy. Previously, the spiritual energy here was either of no attribute, earth attribute or water attribute, and he had never encountered fire attribute. Now that fire spiritual energy suddenly appeared, could it be that he was near the earth fire? He ordered the soul-chasing bees to find the source of the fire spiritual energy. Thousands of soul-chasing bees flew in the direction of the fire spiritual energy. After a quarter of an hour, all the soul-chasing bees returned. Wang Daoyuan followed their guidance and arrived at a spacious cave. This was probably the lowest level of the entire karst cave. There was only a passageway at the top. The rest of the cave was just walls. The fire spirit chi in the cave was already very rich, comparable to the fire spirit chi in the vicinity of the second stage fire spirit vein. Wang Daoyuan used his divine senses to explore the surroundings. The rocks here were very dense and hard. His divine senses could only reach a depth of a few dozen feet. There was no trace of a fire spirit vein or earth fire. Only a tiny crack was found on one of the rock walls, through which the fire spirit chi was transmitted. He immediately took out the spirit-seeking compass and activated the vermilion bird pattern on it. The vermilion bird pattern spat out a beam of fire elemental spiritual energy and probed into the rock wall along the crack. The spiritual light beam penetrated more than 300 meters and found a large space on the other side of the rock wall. There was also a magma lake on the ground. The fire attribute's spiritual power was emitted from the magma lake. Moreover, in addition to fire spiritual energy, there seemed to be water spiritual energy as well. The spirit-seeking compass could only detect the general situation and could not accurately determine what it was. Wang Daoyuan became excited. A water elemental spiritual object near the magma lake was definitely not something ordinary. It was very likely to be a treasure of heaven and earth. It took him a lot of effort to reach this place. How could he easily give up on something that was suspected to be a treasure of heaven and earth? As for the 300 meters thick rock wall, it was an insurmountable moat for other foundation establishment cultivators. But for Wang Daoyuan, it was not much of a hindrance. With the dust-returning flame, no matter how thick the rock wall was, it could be slowly burned through. It would just take some time. He had plenty of time now. He did not care if it took 8 or 10 years. It would take at most 10 days to half a month to break through a rock wall. He took out a portion of the dust-returning flame from the space and placed it on the rock wall. The dust-returning flame seemed to be very interested in the rock wall. As soon as the rock wall touched the dust-returning flame, it burned. The spiritual energy contained in these rocks was enough to maintain the burning of the dust-returning flame. Wang Daoyuan only needed to inject a small amount of spiritual energy and divine sense to control the dust-returning flame. After 7 or 8 days, the rock wall was finally burned into a cave that could allow one person to pass through. He passed through the rock wall and came to the space behind it. It was very spacious. The entire space covered an area of 20 to 30 mu. The magma lake was also 5 to 6 mu. The concentration of fire spiritual energy here was comparable to a high-grade rank 3 spirit vein. In addition, one could directly extract pure fire spiritual energy from the magma. For fire elemental cultivators, this was simply a paradise on earth. He was a penta spirit root cultivator. The most suitable thing for him was a non-elemental spirit vein. He was not very interested in the magma lake. His divine sense scanned the entire space and soon found a corner that contained water elemental spiritual energy. He walked forward and took a look. He was excited. He had really encountered a treasure of heaven and earth. This was the legendary earth milk. The full name of the earth milk was earth vein spirit milk. It was the essence condensed from spirit veins. The balance of the 5 elements in the earth vein spirit milk could only be condensed from non-elemental spirit veins. Furthermore, the grade of the spirit vein could not be lower than grade 3. The higher the grade of the spirit vein, the better the quality of the earth vein spirit milk. After consuming it, one could instantly recover their spiritual energy. Even spiritual wine could not compare to it. If it was 1,000-year-old earth vein spirit milk, it could even help one make a breakthrough. It was said that a drop of 10,000-year-old earth vein spirit milk produced by grade 4 spirit veins could increase one's chances of making a breakthrough to yuanying. The earth vein spirit milk was located in a corner of the space. There was a 6-meter-long stalactite above it and a bowl-sized hole below it. The remaining earth vein spirit milk was only enough for 2 to 3 mouthfuls. There was roughly 40 to 50 drops left. The earth vein spirit milk was different from what the legends said. Perhaps it was because the earth vein spirit milk was located at the edge of the lava lake where the fire spiritual energy was too dense, causing the earth vein spirit milk to have a hint of fiery red color. It should be a little over 1,000 years old. However, the quality wasn't great. After all, the non-elemental spirit vein here was only a low-grade rank 3 spirit vein. It could barely condense earth vein spirit milk, but the quality wouldn't be great. But even so, the earth vein spirit milk was still useful for Violet Palace realm cultivators. But it was a pity that the earth vein spirit milk wasn't useful for establishing the Violet Palace realm. After all, establishing the Violet Palace realm required violet qi, pure yin and pure yang. The earth vein spirit milk contained the 5 elemental spiritual energies. After the earth vein spirit milk was produced, it was contaminated by the fire elemental spiritual energy in the magma lake, and the 5 elemental spiritual energies were already out of balance. The earth vein spirit milk could be considered a treasure for fire elemental cultivators. For fire elemental cultivators, there was no way they could consume it, and they could only exchange it for spiritual stones. Wang Daoyuan had penta-spiritual roots, so he could also consume it. He stored the earth vein spirit milk into a second-grade jade bottle and placed it in the space within the spiritual pearl. It would be a waste if he didn't try it. He took out a drop of earth vein spirit milk and didn't dare to consume it directly. After all, it was something that even Violet Palace realm cultivators could use to increase their cultivation. There was definitely a lot of spiritual energy in it. As a third-level foundation establishment cultivator, if he were to consume it rashly, he might just explode. This drop of earth vein spirit milk was only the size of a soybean. He used his spiritual energy to separate 1/10 of the earth vein spirit milk from it. He cultivated the 5 elemental immortal transformation art, and his spiritual energy was denser than other cultivators of the same cultivation. So this amount of spiritual energy was still bearable for him. When he consumed the earth vein spirit milk, a surge of spiritual energy instantly entered his meridians. He immediately circulated the 5 elemental immortal transformation art and converted the spiritual energy into his own. In a few breaths' time, the spiritual energy was completely refined. However, there was too much spiritual energy in his dantian. Chapter 238. At this moment, Wang Daoyuan felt that his whole body was abnormally hot. The earth vein spirit milk was born by the magma lake and absorbed a large amount of fire attribute spiritual energy, causing the 5 elements spiritual energy to be out of balance. He continued to use his cultivation method and used half a cup of tea's time to condense the excess spiritual energy into true essence, which slightly improved his cultivation. He estimated that if he took the entire drop of earth vein spirit milk, he could directly break through to the 4th level of foundation establishment. However, the heat in his body did not recede, but instead became more intense. He only took 1/10 of a drop of earth vein spirit milk, and the side effect was so severe. If he directly took the entire drop of earth vein spirit milk, he would probably be burned to death. After another quarter of an hour, the heat turned into a burning sensation, and he felt that his whole body was about to burn up. He could not suppress it even when he used his water attribute spiritual energy. After being tortured for half a day, he took out a mysterious yin jade gourd from the space and forcibly refined the yin qi to suppress the burning sensation. After refining the yin qi, a cool feeling spread from his dantian to his meridians, and the burning sensation was significantly reduced. Wang Daoyuan continued to refine the yin qi, consuming 5 gourds of yin qi to completely dissolve the burning sensation. Although the yin qi was harmful to the body, it was still spiritual energy. The yin qi and the fire attribute spiritual energy in the earth vein spirit milk dissolved each other, and his body did not suffer much damage. On the contrary, because he refined a large amount of spiritual energy, his cultivation improved a lot, and he could already try to break through to the 4th level of foundation establishment. He did not take any more earth vein spirit milk to try to break through. Instead, he carefully put away the remaining earth vein spirit milk, which was used to resist the yin qi of the Gui water nether spring. When he was near the Gui water nether spring, if the yin qi was too strong and he could not resist it with his spiritual energy, he could take some earth vein spirit milk. He could use the fire attribute spiritual energy in the earth vein spirit milk to resist the corrosion of the yin qi. After taking away all the earth vein spirit milk, he did not touch the stalactite that produced it. Even if he cut it off and took it away, it was worthless. Without the support of the entire spirit vein, the stalactite could not produce earth vein spirit milk in the space of the spirit pearl. He left the space and used the earth wall technique to seal the passage, maintaining the environment that produced the earth vein spirit milk. In the northern part of the mountain, the depth of the underground magma was usually about 80,000 feet below the ground. Therefore, the depth of Wang Daoyuan's current location should be around 80,000 feet. According to 5 Elements Taoist records, the Gui water nether spring was more than 7,000 feet underground. At this time, the place he was at was already lower than the Gui water nether spring. It was not very reliable to dig a hole close to the magma. To dig to the Gui water nether spring, it was better to dig from a similar depth. After advancing several hundred feet upward, he took out the spirit-seeking compass and determined the direction. The spirit-seeking compass and the formation measuring compass were both developed from the foundation of the compass. Determining direction was a basic function, but this function was not usually used. The 10th water spirit spring was directly north of him. After using the spirit-seeking compass to find the north direction, he released the soul-chasing bees to find a passage extending north. With the help of the karst cave, he could get as close as possible to the place where the Gui water nether spring was located and shorten the digging distance, which could save a lot of effort. With the help of the soul-chasing bees, it took him more than a month to move north for over 600 miles. During this process he encountered many second-rank demonic beasts. With the warning of the soul-chasing bees, he successfully avoided them and did not have any conflicts. Finally he reached the northern edge of the karst cave. Further north there were no more karst caves. It should be more than 300 miles away from the location of the Gui water nether spring. This distance could only be covered by digging slowly. Before starting to dig, he first used the spirit-seeking compass to detect the situation in the rock formation ahead. If he dug directly, encountering demonic beasts living underground would not be a big problem. If he encountered an underground water vein, the water would rush in and the huge water pressure could instantly kill him. After probing for a while within 500 feet, there were no demonic beasts or underground water veins. Only then did he feel relieved to start digging. Of course, his digging was not like mining where he dug forward bit by bit. Instead, he directly released the dust-returning flame to burn the rock wall. Some rocks burned by the dust-returning flame would produce a large amount of earth attribute spirit qi, which could support the burning of the dust-returning flame. In this case, Wang Daoyuan only needed to use a small amount of spirit qi and spiritual sense to control the direction of the dust-returning flame, and the forward speed was very fast. Some rocks, after being ignited by the dust-returning flame, produced less earth attribute spirit qi, which required him to consume a large amount of spirit qi and spiritual sense to maintain the burning of the dust-returning flame. In this case, he needed to stop frequently to recover his spirit qi and spiritual sense, and the speed of his advance was greatly reduced. In this half-year he had advanced a little more than 18 miles to the north. On average he could advance about 1 mile every 10 days. One day, a year later, Wang Daoyuan used the spirit-seeking compass to detect the situation inside the rock wall and found a small hole the size of an adult's arm more than 200 feet in front of him. The small hole was continuous and curved, very much like a mouse hole. Other than that, he did not find any demonic beasts or underground water veins. Wang Daoyuan did not take a detour but continued to push forward. These small holes were very useful. When he used the dust-returning flame to burn the rock wall, the flame could enter the small hole and burn the rock wall inside and outside at the same time. It was much more efficient than burning the rock wall from the front. More than 10 days later he had advanced more than 200 feet. The small hole that he had detected earlier appeared in the rock wall. His spiritual sense followed the small hole and probed inside. He did not find any living things, only a few long hairs. The long hairs were grayish-black and he could not be sure what kind of demonic beast left them behind. There were obvious bite marks on the inner wall of the small hole. Judging from the bite marks, the demonic beast that dug the small hole was most likely a mouse. The remaining spirit qi on the long hairs showed that this demonic beast was not very strong, only a first-rank superior. He had the soul-extinguishing bell and the vampiric vine. No matter how many first-rank demonic beasts came, they would all die. Especially in this narrow underground cave, they posed no threat to him, and he could use the cave to advance without worry. With the help of the cave, the dust-returning flame burned the rock wall much faster. Could advance about 1 mile every 5 days, doubling the speed. Of course, this was if the direction of the small hole was reliable. If the direction of the small hole deviated from the direction he was advancing, it would not be of much use. A month passed. When Wang Daoyuan used the spirit-seeking compass to probe the rock wall in front of him, he found traces of demonic beasts in the small hole for the first time. Moreover, the place where the demonic beasts were more than 100 feet away could not be called a small hole. There was a spacious cave there and there were many mouse-type demonic beasts in the cave. Wang Daoyuan was excited. If he could control this group of mouse-type demonic beasts and make them dig a suitable hole in the rock wall, he would be able to advance every 5 days. He would be able to maintain the speed of 1 kilometer every 5 days. In this way he would only need a little more than 4 years to dig through a distance of about 300 kilometers. Since this group of mice could be so useful, he naturally could not let them go so easily. He immediately advanced toward the group of mice. These mice were really bold. Instead of running away, they gathered together as if they were going to defend their home with their lives. After Wang Daoyuan advanced to the group of mice, he finally saw them clearly. They looked very similar to ordinary mice with grayish-black fur. The only difference between them and ordinary mice was that their 2 front teeth were silver-white, flickering with a cold light. This was a first-rank superior demonic beast, the gold-biter rat. The gold-biter rat was usually a first-rank superior demonic beast. The king of the group could grow to a second-rank inferior demonic beast. The gold-biter rat's combat strength was not much. Their only specialty was their 2 sharp front teeth. Gnawing on hard rock and refining materials was their greatest pleasure. Chapter 239. It would be too much of a waste to kill this group of gold-biter rats. He would find the Rat King and beat it up, forcing it to recognize him as its master. Using the Rat King to command the entire group of rats to help him dig a hole and speed up his advance was the most cost-effective. When the dust-returning flame reached the cave where the rats were, Wang Daoyuan immediately withdrew the dust-returning flame for fear of harming the rats. The rats were very alert. When they saw that the dust-returning flame could burn through solid rock, they were so scared that they didn't dare move. After Wang Daoyuan withdrew the dust-returning flame, the rats looked at him eagerly. They wanted to surround and attack him, but they were also afraid that he would release that terrifying flame again. After waiting for a quarter of an hour, a foot-long rat crawled over. This rat looked similar to the other gold-biter rats, but its front teeth were golden and it was 3 times longer than the other gold-biter rats. The spirit energy fluctuations on its body showed that it was a low-grade rank 2 demon beast, and not far from mid-rank 2. Its cultivation was similar to Wang Daoyuan's. It squeaked at the group of rats and the rats began to stir. After a while, over 100 high-grade rank 1 gold-biter rats charged at Wang Daoyuan. Wang Daoyuan wanted to lure the Rat King out, so he didn't directly subdue them. Instead, he used Earth Attribute Spirit Energy to create a protective barrier. The gold-biter rats surrounded the barrier and gnawed at it, but the Earth Attribute Spirit Energy within the barrier had the corrosive effect of the dust-returning flame. When the rats gnawed at it, their front teeth would also be corroded. Wang Daoyuan could use his spirit energy to constantly replenish the barrier. If he ran out of spirit energy, he could drink scarlet blood wine to recover. After 15 minutes, the gold-biter rats that had pounced first had their front teeth mostly corroded and were unable to continue gnawing at the barrier. The Rat King was flustered and exasperated as it hopped around in place. Another 100 or so gold-biter rats charged forward and continued gnawing at the barrier. The result was no different. They had only gnawed for 15 minutes before their front teeth were too short. The other gold-biter rats in the group didn't dare to advance. After a few squeaks, the Rat King personally charged forward. He was just waiting for it to come out. This fellow had been hiding in the rat hole this entire time. Wang Daoyuan was afraid that if he used his true strength, the Rat King would escape through the rat hole. At that time he would no longer have the chance to capture the Rat King. The speed at which the dust-returning flame burned the stone wall was far slower than the speed at which the Rat King escaped through the rat hole. Now that the Rat King had come out to seek death, things would be much easier. When Wang Daoyuan summoned the soul-extinguishing bell, he only unleashed 10% of its power. All the rank 1 gold-biter rats had fainted. The Rat King was also in a daze. It couldn't even stand properly. Wang Daoyuan used the quagmire technique to trap the Rat King. The Rat King sank into the swamp, unable to move. The swamp was created by Earth Attribute spiritual energy and was corrosive. The Rat King had no choice but to circulate its spiritual energy to resist the corrosion. Wang Daoyuan transmitted his voice to it, "Either you submit to me or you die." It wasn't difficult for a rank 2 demonic beast to understand these words. However, the Rat King was still the king of its race. It had its own pride and was unwilling to submit so easily. Wang Daoyuan summoned the returning dust flame, and with the Rat King as the center, it formed a circle of fire with a diameter of 3 feet. Following that, the circle of fire slowly shrank. As the flames burned, there was already a 1-inch deep hole in the ground. Seeing that the fire was about to reach its tail, the Rat King let out a whine, expressing its submission. Wang Daoyuan didn't withdraw the returning dust flame or the quagmire technique, but the circle of fire stopped shrinking. He sent his voice to the Rat King, "Don't resist. After I complete the master recognition, I'll let you go. If you dare to resist, I'll burn you with fire." The Rat King obediently nodded, expressing that it didn't dare to resist. Wang Daoyuan began to use the master recognition technique from the spirit-controlling secret scripture. After a quarter of an hour, the master recognition was completed. With a single thought, the Rat King immediately rolled on the ground in pain. The master recognition was indeed a success. Wang Daoyuan withdrew the returning dust flame and the quagmire technique. Since its life was saved, the Rat King happily jumped around. A day later, all the unconscious goldbiter rats woke up. Through the Rat King, Wang Daoyuan ordered the rats to dig holes in the rocks. It was better to dig a few holes in one place at the same time. When he released the returning dust flame, the flames surged into the holes and burned at the same time, doubling the speed. He originally wanted the goldbiter rats to dig holes in the front while he burned the rocks in the back. However, these goldbiter rats were too cowardly. When they saw the returning dust flame, they fled in all directions, not daring to dig holes at all. With no other choice, he could only have them dig holes first. After they dug a mile forward, he would release the returning dust flame when the goldbiter rats retreated. The speed of burning the rocks was much faster. They could advance a mile in 2 days, but they couldn't keep burning. After advancing a mile, he would stop burning and release the goldbiter rats to dig holes. It would take the goldbiter rats 3 days to dig a mile-long hole in the hard rock. Overall, they were advancing a mile every 5 days on average. However, Wang Daoyuan had 3 days to cultivate every 5 days. He had to give the goldbiter rats some benefits in order to make them work. Otherwise, they would slack off. Fortunately, the goldbiter rats weren't picky eaters. They could eat watermelon rinds, bones, and rotten wood. He felt a little guilty for letting the goldbiter rats dig holes with their lives just for some leftover materials from the spatial dimension. With enough time to cultivate, Wang Daoyuan's cultivation also improved. A month after subduing the goldbiter rats, his cultivation finally broke through to the 4th level of foundation establishment. There were also changes in the spatial dimension. The density of spirit qi increased by a lot, reaching the level of a high-grade Tier 2 spirit vein. However, the size of the spatial dimension didn't change. After testing it with incense, he found that the flow of time didn't change either. It was still 40 times faster. Wang Daoyuan used his clone to observe the boundaries of the spatial dimension and found something unusual. When he first discovered the spatial dimension, he looked out from the inside and saw a hazy gray fog everywhere. There was a trace of purple in the gray. Now the purple was clearly less and the gray fog was thinner. In places where the gray fog was extremely thin, he could vaguely see a large patch of pitch-black space through the fog. After carefully observing for a long time, his clone also found that there seemed to be a slight crack at the edge of the spatial dimension. The gray fog was leaking out from the crack. However, the speed of the leakage was very slow and the spatial dimension wasn't affected. It seemed that this spiritual pearl had been seriously damaged before. This advancement only increased the density of spirit qi, but the spatial dimension didn't increase and the flow of time didn't accelerate. It might be related to this damage. If this damage couldn't be repaired, the spatial dimension and the flow of time probably wouldn't change in the future. The current spatial dimension and flow of time were enough. As long as the density of spirit qi increased and he could grow Tier 3 spirit plants, it would be fine. In the future, when his cultivation was higher and he found a high-grade spirit item, he might be able to repair the crack on the spiritual pearl. It was useless to think about it now. It was better to set fire to the rocks and reach the location of the Gui water nether spring as soon as possible to obtain the water attribute spirit fire. Improving his own strength was the most important. It was fine as long as the spatial dimension of the spiritual pearl was enough. After consolidating his cultivation at the 4th level of foundation establishment, he continued to release the dust-returning flame to burn the rock walls. The density of spirit qi in the spatial dimension increased and the dust-returning flame burned more vigorously. The speed of burning the rocks also increased slightly. However, the speed of advancement didn't increase. The closer he got to the Gui water nether spring, the more underground water veins there were. In order to save his life, Wang Daoyuan could only bypass these water veins. He couldn't advance in a straight line, so the distance he needed to dig was longer. Chapter 240. Originally, it was estimated that it would take more than 4 years to dig up the Gui water nether spring. Now that he had to change directions, it would probably take 6 or 7 years. Something else happened, it would take even longer. Fortunately, this group of gold-biter rats was really capable. They did this kind of high-intensity physical work every day, only eating leftovers, and still found the time to expand the population. 5 years later, the number of gold-biter rats had expanded from 3 to 400 to more than 2,000. If it wasn't for Wang Daoyuan restricting the rats' food, the number of rats would have already exceeded 10,000. However, the more rats there were, the stronger they were. With more rats, they could make more holes and he could burn the rocks much faster. In 5 years, the cave had gone through many twists and turns. It was still a dozen miles away from the estimated location of the Gui water nether spring. The last part of the journey was the most difficult part. Near the Gui water nether spring, there were rock cracks everywhere, and the cracks were filled with underground water. In addition, he also encountered the Earth Terminus Spirit Vein. The spirit chi produced by the Earth Terminus Spirit Vein carried a natural evil aura. The evil aura in the profound Yin spring probably came from this Earth Terminus Spirit Vein. Fortunately, he had the spirit-seeking compass. The evil aura would seriously interfere with the compass. When the spirit chi beam encountered the evil aura, the entire compass would spin randomly. After discovering the abnormality of the compass, Wang Daoyuan immediately changed directions and pushed in another direction. However, there were too many rock cracks nearby. 100 feet in a straight line could take 7 or 8 turns. After more than a year, he finally reached a place only 200 or 300 feet away from the Gui water nether spring. The cave passed through the water veins and rock cracks. Some of the cracks were only a little more than 3 feet apart, so the passage had to pass through the middle. He had to use the earth wall technique to strengthen the rock layer. The spirit chi used to cast the earth wall technique was converted from fire attribute spirit chi. The original earth attribute spirit chi had the corrosive characteristics of the dust returning flame. Using it to strengthen the rock might backfire. This Gui water nether spring was also very domineering. When the spirit chi beam of the spirit-seeking compass passed through, it was annihilated as soon as it touched the spring water. He used his divine sense to investigate, and his divine sense was instantly devoured. There was even a power in the spring water that extended along with his divine sense. He was so scared that he immediately cut off his divine sense to avoid being injured by the power of the Gui water nether spring. The power in this Gui water nether spring seemed to be able to directly harm the soul. 20 to 30 zhang of rock couldn't completely block the yin chi of the Gui water nether spring. Wang Daoyuan could already feel a bone-piercing chill from where he was. He could only consume a small amount of earth vein spirit essence to resist the yin chi. He didn't rashly break through the last 20 to 30 feet of the rock stratum. Instead, he gathered pure yin chi here. The purity of the yin energy here was so high that it was almost undetectable in the outside world. If he didn't collect some, it would be a huge loss. Furthermore, the Gui water nether spring had the ability to harm souls. When collecting the phase in the spring water, one's soul might be severely injured. It would be best to collect more pure yin chi, cultivate the inky jade lotus, and store more lotus seeds and lotus roots. If one's soul was heavily injured, it was very likely that one would faint directly. If one fainted beside the Gui water nether spring, it would be impossible to wake up again. Before burning through the last 20 to 30 feet of the wall, he would first eat some lotus roots and lotus seeds. Once his soul was injured, he would be able to recover quickly and wouldn't faint on the spot. The inky jade lotus had been growing in the space of the spirit bead for about 1,000 years. If it wasn't for the lack of pure yin chi, it would have bloomed and borne seeds many times. Now that the pure yin chi was abundant, and the time flow in the space of the spirit bead was 40 times faster, it wouldn't take long for it to bloom and bear seeds. He filled the profound yin jade gourd with pure yin chi, put the gourd into the space of the spirit bead and handed it to the avatar. The avatar injected the pure yin chi in the jade gourd into the pond where the inky jade lotus was planted. In less than a quarter of an hour, the inky jade lotus continued to grow new lotus stems, and there was a small bud on the lotus stem. 3 days later, the first bud bloomed. The flower of the inky jade lotus was pure black, as if it was carved from a whole piece of inky jade. The name of the inky jade lotus was indeed worthy. At this time, 5 inky jade lotus plants had grown 20 flower buds. 5 lotus flowers had bloomed, and there was no longer a new lotus stem growing, and the pure yin qi was exhausted. Wang Daoyuan summoned the avatar Wu Yi and Li Qingchuan from the space of the spirit bead, and asked them to help collect the pure yin qi. The avatar Bai Xing was responsible for injecting the pure yin qi into the lotus pond. A huge amount of pure yin qi was constantly injected into the lotus pond. Half a month had passed outside the space and more than a year had passed inside the space. All the lotus seeds of the inky jade lotus had matured. The yield of lotus seeds was a bit low, and each lotus pod only bore 5 or 6 lotus seeds. 20 lotus pods, a total of 108 lotus seeds were harvested. After the inky jade lotus bloomed and bore seeds, it would not wither but could bloom and bear seeds many times. There was no need to rush to replant it. Leaving a dozen lotus seeds with good quality for planting later, the rest of the lotus seeds could be consumed. He swallowed a lotus seed to see how effective the medicine was. After swallowing the lotus seed, he immediately ran the cultivation technique to refine the lotus seed. In less than half a cup of tea's time, the lotus seed was completely refined, and a pure yin qi with medicinal power poured into the meridians. This yin qi was very gentle. After entering the meridians, he only felt a little cool and there was no bone-piercing chill. Continuing to run the cultivation technique, this yin qi was introduced into the meridians of the head. The foundation establishment cultivator had not yet opened the zifu, and the meridians connecting the Naiwan Palace and other acupoints of the body had not been opened, and the yin qi could not be directly sent into the sea of consciousness. It could only be sent to the head first so that the yin qi passed through the body and gradually penetrated into the sea of consciousness. After half a day, about half of the yin qi penetrated into the sea of consciousness, and the rest of the yin qi was scattered to various parts of the body. The yin qi and medicinal properties that penetrated into the sea of consciousness were absorbed by the soul, and he only felt a burst of relaxation. In order to control the avatar, his soul lost 10%. The medicinal power of this lotus seed made his soul recover by 1,000th. He only needed to take 100 more lotus seeds and his soul could be restored completely. The rest of the lotus seeds would be needed in an emergency, and he was not in a hurry to restore his soul for the time being. After the two avatars filled more than 30 profound yin jade gourds with pure yin qi, Wang Daoyuan took them back into the spiritual bead space. The problem of the Gui water nether spring hurting the soul could be temporarily stabilized by the lotus seeds. The spiritual objects bred in the spring water could also be put into the spiritual bead space. The last problem was the pressure of the water. According to the records of the 5-element spiritual master, the place where the Gui water nether spring was located was an irregular spherical space with a diameter of about 10 feet, and the whole space was filled with spring water. The amount of water in the Gui water nether spring was very large, and the huge water pressure squeezed the surrounding rocks out of the cracks, and the spring water flowed up along the cracks. The 5-element spiritual master with his Jindan stage cultivation base could only hold on for a quarter of an hour inside and then quickly left. With his cultivation base, if he did not take any measures and directly went in, there was absolutely no chance of survival. In addition, he had to think about how to get out alive after getting the treasures in the Gui water spirit spring. After digging out the 20 to 30 feet stone wall, the spring water flowed out along the passage he came from and blocked the passage. If he wanted to go out, he could only rely on the smoke escape. The distance from here to the karst cave was more than 300 miles. The passage twisted and turned, and the total length was more than 1,000 miles. Moreover, in this kind of passage he needed to change direction frequently, and the speed of the smoke escape was greatly affected. With a passage of more than 1,000 miles, it would take more than a day to reach the karst cave. If he stayed in the spring water of the Gui water nether spring for a day, even if he had the earth vein spiritual essence, he would still freeze to death. If these two problems were not solved, he would absolutely not dare to break through the last 20 feet. Chapter 241. After thinking for a long time, he came up with a method. In his previous life, he had seen a deity who could not catch anything and drained the water in anger. This method could be used as a reference. Taking out the things in the Gui water nether spring was like fishing. Since fishing was not easy, he would drain the water and go in to pick up the fish. Where to put the water was also a problem. He was reluctant to put it into the space of the spirit pearl. This water yin qi was too strong. If it was introduced into the space of the spirit pearl, besides the inky jade lotus, Many spirit plants and spirit beasts, as well as the soul-chasing bees, would not survive. It was better to introduce it underground. Find a suitable place, dig an underground water storage space, and lead the water into the water storage space. The space where the Gui water nether spring was located was only so big. After draining the spring water, some of the water that flowed into the rock cracks would flow back, and there would be spring water that would constantly gush out from the spring. Therefore, this water storage space could not be too small. For safety reasons, it was better to be prepared. Below the passage, he dug out a space that was 300 meters in length, width, and height. According to 5 Elements spiritual master's estimation, the Gui water nether spring would gush out a few hundred kilograms of water in a breath of time. To fill a space that was 300 meters in length, width, and height, this was not something that could be done in a day or two. In this way, he would have enough time to collect the spirit items that the Gui water nether spring produced. Of course, to open up such a large space, it would take a lot of effort. In order to get the treasures in the Gui water nether spring, he had already dug a hole underground for nearly 8 years. The remaining work was nothing. He did not choose to dig near the Gui water nether spring. The yin qi here was too heavy. If he stayed for a long time, his body would not be able to bear it. Especially the main force of digging the hole, the rat group, could not bear the yin qi near the Gui water nether spring. In a place far away from the nether spring, digging this water storage space and then digging a water channel to connect to the nether spring would be much faster. Next, he used the spirit-seeking compass to explore the surroundings of the channel, looking for a suitable place to dig a large space. Finally, he found a suitable place 500 meters away from the Gui water nether spring. In this place there were fewer rock cracks underground. The closest crack to the channel was also 300 meters underground. It was not a problem to dig 100 meters underground space here. This place was far enough away from the Gui water nether spring. The yin qi in the spring water didn't affect this place too much. Rank 1 gold-devouring rats were completely capable of burrowing here. The water storage space needed to be opened up in a very deep place below the passageway. It must not be dug above the passageway. Otherwise, if the hole dug could not be blocked, it would be impossible to come in again. Even if he successfully took away the treasure bred in the Gui water nether spring this time, this place was not without value. The source of the nether water river, which the nether sect relied on for survival, was here. If he needed to deal with the underworld sect in the future, he only needed to destroy the Gui water nether spring, and the nether water river would have no yin qi. In the future, when his array formation cultivation reached the 3rd level of upper grade, he would be able to extract the source of the spirit vein. The Gui water nether spring was once a grade 5 spirit spring, and its source was a true treasure. In addition, since this place could produce the Gui water nether spring, there must be something even deeper underground. With his current strength, it was already extremely difficult for him to take away the treasure nurtured in the netherworld spring. He could only think about other things. However, he had to leave some leeway for his future plans. It was just like a master playing chess. When he had free time, he could casually place a piece that could be of great use in the future. This Gui water nether spring was an idle piece. If he left this idle piece now, in the future when he fought against the underworld sect, it could be used as a killing move to kill the underworld sect. He first dug a 2-foot square hole in the ground of the passageway. He released the returning dust flame, burning it all the way down. After pushing down 100 feet, he expanded the width of the passageway from 2 feet to 100 feet. Pushing down another 100 feet, he dug out an underground space that was 100 feet deep, 100 feet long, and 2 feet wide. This was the initial form of an underground water storage space. After that, he did not continue down, but instead pushed in the direction of the Gui water nether spring. He let the gold biter rats down and had them drill holes in the rock. The gold biter rats had drilled out more than 1,000 holes in the 100-foot square rock wall. Each hole was 100 feet deep. After digging the holes, all the gold biter rats retreated. Wang Daoyuan personally went down and set fire to the rock. Fortunately, the rock here contained a lot of earth attribute spirit energy and there was very little ash. Wang Daoyuan did not need to expend too much spirit energy and consciousness, nor did he need to worry about the problem of burning ash taking up space. He only needed to control the returning dust flame and prevent the fire from spreading downwards or upwards. Even so, it was not easy to dig out such a large underground space. It took several months to open up this underground water storage space that was 100 feet in length, width, and height. Next, he had to dig out a channel to lead the water from the Gui water nether spring into the water storage space. This work was not easy. The distance between the water storage space and the Gui water nether spring was more than 400 feet in a straight line. Digging out a channel to lead the water would inevitably require him to take a detour to avoid the cracks in the rock. The actual length of the channel was definitely more than 400 feet. If he directly burned it, it would probably take several months. If he let the gold biter rats dig, ordinary gold biter rats would not be able to withstand the invasion of Xianxia. In the end, he set his sights on the Rat King. The Rat King was a low-rank 2-demon beast. Its ability to withstand Xianxia was far from what ordinary gold biter rats could compare to. When he had pushed in before, the Rat King had only commanded the ordinary gold biter rats to work. Now he could only let it personally do the work. In order to increase the Rat King's enthusiasm for work, Wang Daoyuan took out 100 core condensing pills. For every 10 feet the Rat King dug a hole, he would be rewarded with a core condensing pill. This was a pill used by Foundation establishment cultivators to increase their cultivation. It was also useful for demon beast. The Rat King looked at the core condensing pills, its bean-sized rat eyes emitting a light of desire. Its enthusiasm for work soared in an instant, revealing its 3-inch-long golden incisors. Under Wang Daoyuan's guidance, it dug in the direction of the Gui water nether spring. Under the Rat King's golden incisors, the hard rock walls were like tofu. In 2 hours, it could gnaw out a passage of more than 10 feet. 5 days later, the distance between the channel and the Gui water nether spring was less than 10 feet. After opening up this 10 feet distance, the channel would be connected to the bottom of the Gui water nether spring. The Rat King was unwilling to continue digging. The Xianxia in the channel was already very dense. If it continued to dig, it would not be able to withstand it. The remaining distance could only be burned by the returning dust flame. Wang Daoyuan came to the channel, took out a ball of returning dust flame, and threw it into the end of the channel with his spiritual sense and spiritual power. At such a long distance he could not use his spiritual sense to control it. At this time there was no need to control it. As long as it could burn through the last 10 feet, the spring water would automatically extinguish the returning dust flame. After arranging the channel, he left the underground water storage space and sealed the water storage space to prevent the spring water from filling up the water storage space and spreading to the channel above. After that, he came to the end of the channel that he had previously dug. This was the place where he was going to enter the Gui water nether spring. It was still 20 to 30 feet away from the Gui water nether spring. After the channel was opened, he would quickly dig through the 20 to 30 feet thick rock wall. He used the spirit-seeking compass to observe the situation of the channel. 2 hours later, the returning dust flame finally burned through the channel. The Xianxia of the nether spring water, along the 1-foot diameter channel, quickly flowed into the water storage space. Wang Daoyuan continued to send out the Rat King to gnaw through the 20 to 30 feet thick rock wall. The Rat King did not disappoint. In 2 hours it dug out a small hole nearly 20 feet long. After that, because it could not withstand the Xianxia, it retreated from the small hole. Wang Daoyuan released the returning dust flame, widening the small hole dug by the Rat King until it could accommodate one person. When all the spring water accumulated in the Gui water nether spring flowed into the water storage space. He opened the last layer of rock wall between the channel and the Gui water nether spring. After swallowing a drop of earth vein spirit milk, he entered the Gui water nether spring. Chapter 242. The water of the Gui water nether spring had been drawn into the water storage space, and the Xianxia here was not that scary. Even so, Wang Daoyuan felt a bone-piercing cold as if his soul was about to be frozen, and he was about to turn into an ice sculpture. Fortunately, the fire attribute of the earth vein spirit essence began to take effect, and a warm feeling flowed throughout his body. Although he still felt cold, but there was no bone-piercing cold and the feeling of his soul being frozen. Relying on the earth vein spirit essence, he was barely able to resist the invasion of the Xianxia. At this time he looked down at the mouth of the nether spring. He saw that the mouth of the spring was filled with black spring water, and the spring water emitted a black beam of light. This black beam of light should be emitted by the spirit object that was nurtured in the spring water. The concentration of the spiritual chi of this Gui water nether spring was much higher than his own jade dragon spring, and was at least a 4th step spirit spring. He swallowed another drop of Earth Vein spirit essence and came to the mouth of the spring. He was still not sure what the spirit object was and did not know how to take it out. The power of his spiritual sense could not be used easily, as this spirit object may have the effect of damaging the soul. He first took out the sharp metal sword and tried to pick out the spirit object. This sharp metal sword was a first-step upper-grade magical weapon, and was obtained by killing Jing Kong when he first came to the Green Willow region. When the sharp metal sword entered the spring water, it was frozen and broken into several pieces. Then he took out the Profound Yang sword. The Profound Yang sword was made of a stronger material, but when it entered the spring water, it was not much better than the sharp metal sword, and also broke into several pieces. He was still not reconciled and took out the second-step lower-grade magical weapon Flat Wave Sword. After entering the spring water, the Flat Wave Sword did not immediately break, but successfully touched the spirit object. He wanted to pick out the spirit object, but it was useless. The Flat Wave Sword directly passed through the spirit object, and after the sword came out of the water, the spring water still emitted a black beam of light. But the tip of the sword carried a wisp of black flame, which became smaller and finally extinguished. The Flat Wave Sword was also completely scrapped. It seems that the spirit object that was nurtured in the Gui Water Nether Spring was indeed a spirit fire. But how to take out the spirit fire was also a troublesome matter. Using things to pick it out was obviously not reliable. Sucking it up was a way, but he did not have that kind of magical weapon. Besides, ordinary magic tools could not withstand the power of the Gui Water Nether Spring and the black flame. Wang Daoyuan used the water dragon technique and controlled the water dragon to enter the spring and bring out the spiritual fire. Unfortunately, as soon as the water dragon entered the spring water, it immediately dissipated. This method would not work either. After squatting beside the spring for less than 100 breaths of time, he felt a bone-piercing chill. Even his soul felt an extremely strong chill. The fire attribute spiritual energy of the Earth Vein spiritual elixir was no longer enough to resist the Yin Qi. He converted all the spiritual energy in his body into fire spiritual energy, and then used the fire armor technique. A fiery red armor covered his whole body. Wang Daoyuan felt a little better, but this was not a long-term solution. Even the fire armor art couldn't completely block the Yin Qi's invasion. He wouldn't be able to hold on for more than a quarter of an hour. After pondering for a moment, he still could not think of a way to retrieve the flame seed. The fire seed was the core of the spiritual fire. As long as the fire seed was not extinguished, no matter how weak the spiritual fire was, as long as there was a sufficient supply of spiritual energy, it could recover very quickly. Without the fire seed, the spiritual fire would become a water without a source, a tree without roots. If there was no suitable fuel, it would soon be extinguished. If he couldn't retrieve the fire seed of the spiritual fire, it would be meaningless no matter how much spiritual fire he took out. After pondering for a while, he still couldn't think of a way to retrieve the fire seed. He could only take a risk with the power of spiritual sense. If he could successfully retrieve the fire seed, as long as his soul was not directly burned, it was acceptable to suffer some damage. However, he still had to make some preparations. He first swallowed 2 black jade lotus seeds. After refining them, he sent their medicinal properties into the meridians in his head. Then in his sea of consciousness he condensed a soul-splitting blade. Once the soul was ignited by the black spiritual fire, he would use the soul-splitting blade to cut off the burning part of the soul. Wang Daoyuan used his spiritual sense to explore the spring water. As soon as his spiritual sense touched the spring water, it immediately ignited a black flame. Previously, when he used the Flat Wave Sword to find the approximate location of the fire seed, he did not hesitate. The power of his spiritual sense burst out and separated the spring water. After a breath of time, an inch-tall black flame appeared in the middle of the spring water. The shape of this flame was similar to the flame of an ordinary oil lamp. It looked ordinary, but the color was as black as ink. He did not dare to dawdle. The power of his spiritual sense was rapidly burning. In a short time, the power of his spiritual sense was consumed by more than half. If this continued, after 19 breaths he would pass out because of the exhaustion of his spiritual sense. He used the power of his spiritual sense to wrap the black flame and pulled it towards him. The black flame left the spring water with the power of his spiritual sense and flew towards his head. When it was about a foot away from his head, He immediately controlled the space of the spiritual pearl and took the black flame in. However, this flame did not care about fire principles. It resisted the suction of the spiritual pearl and entered his sea of consciousness, burning towards his soul. If this continued, wouldn't his soul be completely burned? In desperation, his soul escaped into the spiritual pearl's space. The black flame chased his soul into the spiritual pearl's space. Wang Daoyuan also brought the previously condensed soul-splitting blade into the spiritual pearl's space. The black flame quickly burned his soul. He immediately controlled the soul-splitting blade and cut off the part of his soul that was burning. The rest of his soul that was not ignited quickly escaped from the spiritual pearl's space. After the black flame burned the part of the soul that was cut off, it wanted to continue to chase the main soul. The spiritual pearl's space had been closed and it could not come out. The soul withdrew from the space, and the black flame was locked in the spiritual pearl's space. Wang Daoyuan only felt a splitting headache. Looking inside his sea of consciousness, he found that his soul was only about 70% of the complete situation. Controlling the divided soul only used 10% of the soul. This time the black flame burned away 20%. Fortunately, he took 2 lotus seeds in advance. At the moment he could barely stay awake. The bank of the Gui water nether spring was not a place to stay for a long time. The cold yin qi was constantly eroding. If he stayed for a while, he was afraid that he would die here. He immediately fled to the passage and left the Gui water nether spring. After entering the passage, regardless of the serious injury of his soul, he forcibly cast the earth wall technique to seal the passage and prevent the yin qi from continuing to leak out. He now had a splitting headache and could not hold on for too long. He could only condense a 50 or 60 feet thick stone wall first. Subsequently, he immediately fled to a place more than 1,000 feet away from the Gui water nether spring. There was not much yin qi here. Previously, for the sake of insurance, he put more than 10 black jade lotus seeds into the storage bag and put them on his body. Now that he did not dare to open the spiritual pearl space, these more than 10 lotus seeds came in handy. He immediately consumed 3 lotus seeds to stabilize his soul's injuries. After 7 or 8 days, he took a total of 10 lotus seeds. The soul injury was stabilized and he no longer had a splitting headache. It was just that his soul was seriously damaged and he felt that his thinking had become dull. At this time he still had 3 lotus seeds left as a backup to prevent the black jade lotus in the spiritual pearl space from being burned by the black flame. His soul was now incomplete by nearly 30%. Without the black jade lotus, he would not be able to open up the Zifu in this life. He did not know how the spiritual pearl space was damaged by the black flame. It was impossible for it to dominate the entire space. After all, the life spiritual fire and the returning dust flame were not to be trifled with. After the black flame left the Gui water nether spring, there was no high-quality water attribute spiritual power and yin qi supply. Its endurance was definitely not good. The life spiritual fire was supported by the mysterious peach tree sapling, and the returning dust flame could also burn the soil in the space to obtain spiritual power. In a war of attrition, the black flame was far worse. He did not dare to rashly use the power of spiritual sense to explore the situation in the spiritual pearl's space. If the black flame chased after his soul and burned it, he would lose part of his soul and become a fool. He communicated with the clone and observed the situation in the entire spiritual pearl's space through the clone. Chapter 243. At that moment, the space was not as messy as Wang Daoyuan had imagined. There were not many losses to the Grade 2 spirit items. Almost all the Grade 1 spirit plants such as the spirit grains and scarlet blood ginseng were dead. Seeing that the situation was bad, the spirit beasts fled and did not suffer any losses. The soul-chasing bees also carried their beehives to avoid the attacks of the black spirit fire and suffered minimal losses. The black spirit fire stayed obediently in the lotus pond and did not dare to release its cold aura wantonly. The life spirit fire and dust returning flame at the side were much stronger. Even the peach blossom sapling supporting the life spirit fire seemed to have grown a little taller. It felt as though the 2 local tyrants had taken care of the new dragon. Through the memories of his clone, he knew that the black spirit fire was extremely domineering after entering and released its cold aura wantonly. Most of the Grade 1 spirit plants in the space were frozen to death at this moment. With the life spirit fire protecting the surroundings, there were no losses to these precious spirit plants. The reason why spirit fires were called spirits was because they had some spirituality. Even though they were far from being sentient and could not think, they had instinctive reactions. The actions of the black spirit fire threatened the life spirit fire and dust returning flame. Even though the two spirit fires were more peaceful, they would not allow themselves to be trampled on. Since the black spirit fire was looking for trouble, they retaliated. They released their spirit energy to fight against the cold aura and water attribute spirit energy. The spirit energy released by the black spirit fire contained both the cold aura and water attribute spirit energy. Even though the cold aura was extremely lethal to living beings, it was nothing to the spirit fire. The dust returning flame did not care at all. The peach blossom sapling supporting the life spirit fire was a living being as well. However, the peach blossom sapling possessed extremely strong yang aura. Even though it was not released, it could still defend against the attacks of the cold aura easily. Since the cold aura was ineffective against the two spirit fires, the remaining water attribute spirit energy was even more useless. Among the 5 elements, earth countered water and the dust returning flame countered the black spirit fire to begin with. As for the black spirit fire's water attribute spirit items, they would be absorbed by the peach blossom sapling and turned into spirit energy for the life spirit fire. Between the dust returning flame and the life spirit fire, one countered the other. Without sufficient spirit energy, the black spirit fire was not a match for it in a war of attrition. After tossing and turning in the space for 2 days, the black spiritual fire was terrified. It withdrew its yin qi and water attribute spiritual energy and hid in the lotus pond. He also did not know what the black spirit fire was called. Since it was born from the Gui water nether spring, then it was called Gui water nether flame. Wang Daoyuan set the position of the spiritual pearl's space, and the returning dust flame was in the middle. The life spirit fire was of the wood attribute and corresponded to the east. The location of the life spirit fire was directly east, while the Gui water death flame was directly north of the dust returning flame. The life spirit fire and the Gui water nether flame were exactly 15 meters away from the dust returning flame. The space only lost spirit grains, red blood ginseng and a few other rank 1 spirit herbs. With enough seeds stored, it wouldn't take much effort to replant them. On the contrary, he had suffered a great loss, losing 20% of his soul. According to the calculation, 1 black jade lotus seed could recover 1,000th of the soul. This meant that he had lost 200 lotus seeds. However, with the Gui water death flame, the pure yin qi that the inky jade serene lotus needed did not have to worry. 200 lotus seeds wouldn't take too much time. After the injury of his soul was stabilized, he came to the end of the passage and continued to use the earth wall technique to block the passage. After all, the rock created by the earth wall technique was not as strong as the original rock. Previously, he had only condensed a 50 to 60 meter thick wall, and it might not be able to block the spring water. No matter what, he had to condense a 200 meter thick wall to ensure that it could withstand the pressure of the spring water. Just as he was concentrating on condensing the wall, the mysterious yin market above was bustling, and it even alarmed the Zifu realm cultivators. Since 8 days ago, the amount of water in the mysterious yin spring began to decrease, and the yin qi gradually became thinner. Now there was no yin qi at all. There was a lot of evil qi, and the mysterious yin spring could be renamed as the mysterious evil spring. Many foundation establishment cultivators were at their wits' end, and specially invited the Zifu realm cultivators to come. The Zifu realm cultivators also didn't know the situation, and they didn't dare to go deep into the water to check. More than 10,000 miles south of the mysterious yin spring, the Jindan realm cultivators of the underworld sect also panicked. Since 8 days ago, the yin qi in the Darkwater River began to decrease, and now there was almost no yin qi at all. The yin qi in the Darkwater River was the foundation of the underworld sect. Without the yin qi, the underworld sect's mountain gate would also be destroyed. If they couldn't find a new source of yin qi, the underworld sect could directly announce its dissolution. The yin qi could also be obtained by killing people and refining their souls, but the amount of yin qi obtained was very small, and it was also very impure. Not to mention the poor effect of cultivation, it also had a lot of side effects. The underworld sect still had some reserves which could last for a long time. Only the higher-ups knew that the yin qi in the Darkwater River had been cut off, and the entire underworld sect was in a state of tranquility. The mysterious yin market couldn't be hidden, and all the cultivators knew that the yin qi in the mysterious yin spring had disappeared. Many evil cultivators had already left the mysterious yin spring to look for other sources of yin qi. However, the evil qi in the mysterious yin spring didn't decrease, and this thing was also very useful for evil cultivators, so most of the cultivators still continued to stay here. The culprit of all this was now using the earth wall technique to create rocks underground, and he didn't know that there was such a big commotion outside. His water storage space was too big and his position was relatively low. It would take a long time for the water from the Gui water nether spring to fill up the entire storage space. During this time, the water from the Gui water nether spring couldn't be sent outside, and the yin qi naturally couldn't go out. The Jade Spring Peak wasn't peaceful either. Wang Shui and the two Grand Supreme Elders were nervously looking at Wang Daoyuan's soul lamp in the ancestral temple. 7 or 8 days ago, the clansman found that his soul lamp was almost extinguished, which meant that Wang Daoyuan was seriously injured and dying. In the next few days, the flame of the soul lamp gradually stabilized, and the flame's height also increased a little but not as high as before. This meant that Wang Daoyuan's injury was stable and he had recovered a little, but he still hadn't recovered to his previous level. The three of them were very nervous and they took turns to stare at the flame. Wang Daoyuan used half a month to fill up more than 100 feet of the passage with the earth wall technique. After that, he didn't hurry to go out, but continued to cultivate in the underground passage. His soul was seriously injured and it was better to wait until he recovered before going out. In order to recover as soon as possible, he planted 8 more inky jade lotus in the lotus pond. With the Gui water nether flame, the yin qi was completely enough. After that, he continued to eat lotus seeds to recover his spiritual sense. 3 months later, except for the 8 lotus seeds that he planted, the other lotus seeds were all refined by him. After eating 100 lotus seeds, his soul had recovered to 80%. The 3 people on the Jade Spring Peak saw that Wang Daoyuan's soul lamp was gradually recovering and they were relieved. Wang Daoyuan cultivated in the underground cave for a year, and the second generation of lotus seeds had long matured. He ate more than 200 lotus seeds and his soul was completely restored. His cultivation didn't fall behind, and it rose to the 5th level of foundation establishment. At the 5th level of foundation establishment, he could condense the 3rd spiritual power seed. With the Gui water nether flame, the 3rd spiritual power seed was naturally of the water attribute. After the Gui water nether flame was taught a lesson, it was much more obedient. When Wang Daoyuan took a part of the spiritual fire, it didn't do anything. Wang Daoyuan successfully used the essence of the Gui water nether flame to condense the pitch-black spiritual power seed. Then he ran the 5 spirits Immortal transformation technique, and used the spiritual power seed to completely refine the water attribute spiritual power in his body for the second time. At this time, the water spiritual power in his body had all turned pitch-black. His soul had completely recovered, and his cultivation had broken through to the 5th level of foundation establishment. There was no point in continuing to stay here and it was time to leave. Staying underground for about 10 years and not being able to grasp the latest news was very disadvantageous for a decision-maker. Chapter 244. It took Wang Daoyuan a month to walk out of the cave and return to the surface. He didn't bring the gold biter rats. After all, they were too good at reproducing. Besides digging holes, they didn't have any value. If he put them in the space of the spirit pearl, they would bring disaster to all the spiritual creatures in the space. He changed into an evil cultivator's outfit and rode the Tiger Soul Dark Fiend banner to the Xianin market. He only had one purpose in going to the Xianin market, to kill Su Ting and teach that Wu Brat a lesson. Ever since he left the mountain, there were only 3 times where he was chased like a dog. Zhang Desheng was killed on the spot. The Dark Cloud Wolves couldn't bear the humiliation and left their homes. This time he couldn't swallow this anger if he didn't give that Wu Brat a good lesson. Wu Brat wasn't in the same group as the Zhao clan. Keeping him alive could slow down the expansion of the Zhao clan's strength. Therefore Wang Daoyuan didn't plan to kill him. He only wanted to kill Su Ting as a warning. Flying on his magic tool, he soon arrived at the Xianin spring. From the sky he saw something wrong with the scene below. In the past, around the Xianin spring and on both sides of the river, there were densely packed cultivators collecting evil yin qi. But now there were many empty spaces around the Xianin spring. On both sides of the river there were even more empty spaces. Wang Daoyuan didn't find anything wrong with the Xianin spring in the sky. When he landed on the river downstream of the Xianin spring, he found that there was only evil qi and no yin qi in the river. He asked an old cultivator at the 4th level of foundation establishment beside him, "Daoyu, I've been traveling in other places for many years. What's wrong with the Xianin spring? Why is there only evil qi and no yin qi?" The old cultivator sighed and said, "Who knows? More than a year ago the yin qi in the Xianin spring gradually decreased. Later it completely disappeared. Since there is no more yin energy here, many of the fellow Taoists who mainly cultivate yin energy have left." Wang Daoyuan guessed that the yin qi in the Xianin spring came from the Gui water nether spring. When he was torturing the Gui water nether spring, he didn't think that it would have any negative effects on the Xianin spring. The water storage space he dug next to the Gui water nether spring was too big. If the Gui water nether spring wanted to come out again, he had to fill the water storage space first. The water storage space was 100 feet in length, width, and height, and the Gui water nether spring could only gush out 400 to 500 caddies of water in one breath. It would probably take a few years to fill up the storage space. In the next few years, the yin qi in the dark yin spring would not recover, and a large number of evil cultivators would leave. As a result, the speed at which the Zhao family expanded their strength would slow down. He also thought of the underworld water river. The water of the Gui water underworld spring was mainly divided into 2 branches, north and south. The northern branch was the profound yin spring, while the southern branch was the dark water river. The Gui water nether spring was tormented by him. The profound yin spring had no more yin qi, and the nether water river was not spared either. He naturally knew what the yin qi of the dark water river meant to the nether sect. In the next few years before the Gui water nether spring filled the water storage space, the strategy of the netherworld sect would probably change greatly. They could either fight with their backs to the wall and take the risk of devouring the Crescent Sun Palace, or find a way to reach a compromise with the Crescent Sun Palace and then quietly search for other sources of yin energy. After being cut off from the world for almost 10 years, he knew nothing about what happened in the Zhao country. He originally wanted to kill Su Ting, then leave this place and head to the Guyan market. Now that he had the inky jade lotus seed, he was not afraid of his soul being damaged. He could send his clone Wu Yi to infiltrate the blood shadow and find a way to trick the yin yang purple jade. He could even think of a way to kill Yu Lang and use his identity to trick the yin yang purple jade. Now that the situation with the Netherworld sect was unclear, the Wang family, as a subordinate force of the Netherworld sect, would inevitably be affected by the Netherworld sect. He needed to hurry back. He did not think about killing Su Ting anymore. He cupped his hands and said to the old cultivator, "Thank you, Dai, for clearing my doubts. Since there is no more yin qi here, there is no point for me to stay here. Goodbye." With that, he rode the Tiger Soul Yin Fiend banner and headed east. The south of the Xianin market was the range of the Huiyan Mountains main vein. He did not dare to cross the main vein directly. After traveling more than 2,000 miles in the east, he suddenly found a huge bird blocking his path. He immediately lowered his altitude and landed on the ground. It was too disadvantageous to fight a bird in the air. Seeing that he landed on the ground, the bird also lowered its altitude. When the bird got closer, Wang Daoyuan recognized that it was a familiar bird. It was the bone-devouring vulture that attacked him at the Nine Springs Peak. If the bone-devouring vulture was here, the Wu guy must be here as well. The bone-devouring vulture was very fast. In a short while it was only 200 to 300 feet away from him. 2 people jumped down from the bone-devouring vulture's back. They were both familiar people. It was the young cultivator surnamed Wu and Su Ting. Wang Daoyuan was happy. He was worried about the safety of his family and did not want to bother with these 2 people. He did not expect that these 2 idiots would come to him. Before the cultivator surnamed Wu could say anything, Su Ting smiled and said, "Daoyu Zhou, I didn't expect that we would meet again. I don't know where you can run to this time." The cultivator surnamed Wu said fiercely, "You surnamed Zhou, you are really capable. You actually escaped from under my nose. I wanted to extract your soul and refine it, but my Wu family is recruiting. As long as you can give me your cultivation method, sign a master-servant contract, and recognize me as your master, I will spare your dog life." Wang Daoyuan quietly watched them entertain themselves. When the cultivator surnamed Wu finished speaking, he said with a smile, I had an urgent matter to attend to and did not want to deal with you, but you just had to court death." After saying that, he directly used the cloud mist escape and rushed towards Su Ting. At this time the cloud he used the cloud mist escape was no longer white but black. This black cloud also had the effect of attacking spiritual sense in the soul. No one would be able to recognize that it was the cloud mist escape. Before Su Ting could react, Wang Daoyuan grabbed his neck. Wang Daoyuan injected water attribute spiritual power into Su Ting's head. Su Ting suddenly struggled violently. But no matter how hard he struggled, he could not break free from Wang Daoyuan's hand. The cultivator surnamed Wu wanted to rescue him, but Wang Daoyuan used the cloud mist escape to avoid him. After 10 breaths of time, Su Ting stopped struggling. Wang Daoyuan once again condensed earth attribute spiritual power to cover Su Ting's body. After 20 breaths of time, Su Ting's body turned into a large amount of spiritual power and a small pile of ashes. Seeing this, the cultivator surnamed Wu's sword hand trembled, even forgetting to summon the bone vulture to help. The bone vulture was also frightened by this scene. Without its master telling it to act, it also did not dare to take the initiative to attack. The cultivator surnamed Wu remembered that he still had the advantage of cultivation, so he gathered his courage and cursed, "Reckless fool, you dare to kill my Wu family's people." Without waiting for him to finish, Wang Daoyuan waved his hand saying, "Don't talk nonsense, I wanted to let you go, but you just had to come to court death." Saying that, he used the cloud mist escape again and rushed towards the cultivator surnamed Wu. At the same time he started to condense a meteor shower technique. The cultivator surnamed Wu is a 7th layer foundation establishment cultivator, so he naturally won't just sit there and wait for death. With a wave of his sword, a sword light swept towards Wang Daoyuan. Wang Daoyuan used the cloud mist escape again to dodge the attack. After a breath of time, the meteor shower technique was fully charged. A flaming meteor flew out from his hands, hitting the cultivator surnamed Wu. The cultivator surnamed Wu couldn't dodge in time and was hit in the chest by the meteor. While Wang Daoyuan was digging underground, he often practiced these spells, so he could already use the meteor shower technique one breath at a time. Combined with the improvement of his cultivation, the power of this attack was about 10 times that of a mid-grade 2nd step golden saber talisman. Furthermore, he also practiced the 2nd layer of earth divine lightning, which allowed him to use it in half a breath, 20 times that of a mid-grade 2nd step golden saber talisman. Although the power of the flaming meteor was far inferior to earth divine lightning, it was enough to hit the cultivator surnamed Wu. After being hit by the flaming meteor, the cultivator surnamed Wu was sent flying. At the place where he was about to land, Wang Daoyuan used a quagmire technique, causing the cultivator surnamed Wu to fall into a swamp. Chapter 245. Although this brat surnamed Wu hadn't broken through in 10 years and was a bit of a waste, his cultivation at the 7th level of foundation establishment was solid. Previously he had been scared silly by Wang Daoyuan's sudden attack, but now that he had fallen into the swamp, he felt the corrosive power of the swamp and immediately sobered up. After all, the swamp technique was just a common 2nd grade spell, and Wang Daoyuan's cultivation was lower than the cultivator surnamed Wu, so it naturally couldn't trap him. The cultivator surnamed Wu's spiritual energy burst out, directly breaking the swamp technique. He looked at the trembling bone-eating vulture in the distance and roared, "Why aren't you coming over to help? What use are you?" Seeing its master angry, the bone-eating vulture immediately flew over and attacked Wang Daoyuan. Wang Daoyuan naturally knew that the swamp technique couldn't trap the cultivator surnamed Wu, so after casting the swamp technique he began to accumulate spiritual energy, preparing to cast the meteor fall technique. At the moment he could cast 10 flaming meteors in a row, and he only needed 9 breaths to accumulate spiritual energy. By the time the bone-eating vulture flew over, he had already finished accumulating spiritual energy and shot out a flaming meteor. Although the bone-eating vulture wasn't known for its speed, it was still a bird after all, so it was much more agile than a human cultivator, dodging the first flaming meteor. The second and third came one after another, and the bone-eating vulture had just dodged a flaming meteor. Before it could adjust its flying posture and dodge, it was hit by 2 flaming meteors. The cultivator surnamed Wu didn't stay idle, shooting out several sword rays in a row. He seemed to walk the path of a sword cultivator, so the power of his sword rays was quite good. But he always felt that it was a bit lacking, not knowing if it was because of an incomplete inheritance or a problem with his beliefs. Compared to Li Qingxuan, the speed of his sword rays couldn't be measured. Wang Daoyuan continuously used the smoke escape, dodging all the attacks. His cultivation had increased a lot, and after using the Gui Water Serene Lotus to recover his soul, his spiritual sense cultivation had increased greatly, so he didn't feel any pressure to use two high-level spells at the same time. The bone-eating vulture ate 5 flaming meteors in a row, so even if its body was strong it couldn't bear it. Many of the sword feathers on its wings had been knocked off, and its body was seriously injured, so it couldn't fly anymore, lying on the ground whining. After taking down the bone-devouring vulture, there were still 4 flaming meteorites left. The cultivator surnamed Wu continued to send out sword beams. Wang Daoyuan no longer dodged and directly released flaming meteorites to meet the sword beams head-on. As long as they didn't attack the ground, second-rank demonic beasts usually didn't care about cultivators flying over. He returned to the south of the mountain without any danger. He changed the flying sword under his feet to the shocking wind sword. A few hours later he returned to the Jade Spring Peak. As soon as he arrived at the Jade Spring Peak, the 12th uncle and the 2 Grand Supreme Elders immediately came to welcome him and pulled Wang Daoyuan into the ancestral temple. The 12th uncle Wang Shi asked, "Daoyuan, what happened to you more than a year ago? The soul lamp you left in the clan almost went out?" Wang Daoyuan didn't need to think to know that when he received the Gui Water Death Flame, his soul was seriously damaged, which affected his soul lamp. He answered, "I encountered a strong enemy and was seriously injured. Later I escaped to a secret place and came back after I recovered." He glanced at the 3 of them with his divine sense. The cultivation level of the 5th uncle Wang Xian had already reached the peak of the Foundation Establishment realm. The great-grandfather was also in the 9th layer of the Foundation Establishment realm. As for the 12th uncle Wang Shi, he was still in the 5th layer of the Foundation Establishment realm. Wang Daoyuan smiled and said, "12th uncle, it's not appropriate for you to hide your cultivation level. You entered the Foundation Establishment realm earlier than me, and now your cultivation level is the same as mine. It's not very appropriate." The great-grandfather sensed his cultivation level and smiled. "Good boy, your cultivation level is improving really fast. You're already in the 5th layer of the Foundation Establishment realm." The 12th uncle handed a jade slip to Wang Daoyuan and said, "It's more appropriate for you to enter the 3rd layer of the Foundation Establishment realm. It's too conspicuous for a cultivator with 5 spiritual roots to reach the 5th layer of the Foundation Establishment realm so quickly." Wang Daoyuan's divine sense entered the jade slip and saw that there was a relatively advanced aura concealment spell recorded inside. Aura concealment spell. When this spell was practiced to the point of perfection, it could suppress one's cultivation level to that of an ordinary person. It could be used by anyone below the Golden Core realm. He memorized the contents of the jade slip and returned it to the 12th uncle. He asked, "How come I've never seen such an advanced spell before?" The 12th uncle smiled and said, "How can a spell to hide one's strength be used in the open? It's always been kept by the patriarch. Only Foundation Establishment cultivators are qualified to practice it. It's just that your cultivation level was still normal before, so I didn't give it to you. Your cultivation level has improved too quickly after this trip, so it's better to hide it." Wang Daoyuan nodded and asked, "Did the Netherworld sect do anything unusual in the 10 years I was away? Especially in the past year or so, did the Netherworld sect do anything big?" The 12th uncle thought for a while and replied, "The Netherworld sect was still stable before, but more than a year ago, the Netherworld sect's attitude suddenly changed greatly. They began to communicate with the Thousand Spirit sect and the Cruel Sun Palace to stop the confrontation. They said that they found that the remnants of the Zhao family were recruiting troops in the north of the mountain. If they continued to fight, the Zhao royal family would revive the country and the 3 major sects would be finished. You also found that the Zhao family was recruiting troops in the Guiyuan market. The Netherworld sect has been in the north of the mountain for more than 100 years. The Zhao family is so bold that it's impossible for the Netherworld sect not to find out. They ignored them for so many years and now they suddenly want to deal with the Zhao family. I originally thought that the Zhao family's strength was enough to threaten the Netherworld sect, so the Netherworld sect wanted to join forces with the other 2 major sects to deal with the Zhao family. Why do you mean that there's a hidden story? Chapter 246. Wang Daoyuan smiled. Of course there's a secret. The yin qi in the Mingshui River disappeared, and the underworld sect became anxious. Fifth great-uncle Wang Jian asked doubtfully, is there such a thing? The Mingshui River is the foundation of the underworld sect. Without the yin qi, the underworld sect will be in danger. However, there's no news about this at all. How did you know? Wang Daoyuan replied, it seems that the underworld sect hid it well. I didn't get the news from the underworld sect but from outside. I read in ancient books that the Mingshui River of the underworld sect and the mysterious Yin Spring in the north of the mountain have the same source. In the mysterious Yin Spring, Yin Qi and evil Qi coexist. More than a year ago the mysterious Yin Spring suddenly had no Yin Qi. I guess the Mingshui River may also have no Yin Qi. At this time the underworld sect's foreign policy happened to change greatly, which means that there's indeed an internal problem. Wang Shui pondered, if there's a problem with the Mingshui River, then the underworld sect's decline is only a matter of time. We have to prepare to prevent the underworld sect from falling into the hands of the cruel Sun Palace. Why don't we attack the fallen Dragon Ridge together and open up the migration channel as soon as possible? Wang Daoyuan smiled, don't worry. This situation is also recorded in ancient books. Tens of thousands of years ago a similar situation occurred. It will be restored in a few years. Wang Shui was still not assured and asked, are you confident? Of course he was confident. No one was more confident than him in this matter. Unless the water in the Gui Water Nether Spring broke the more than 100 feet thick stone wall that he resealed, and the spring water flowed into the underground cave from the passage. In that case the underworld sect would be completely destroyed. However, Wang Daoyuan was still confident in his earth wall technique. Although it was not as strong as the original rock wall, it was far stronger than ordinary rock. The original rock wall only needed to be 10 feet thick to resist the pressure of the spring water. Now the stone wall was more than 100 feet deep and it would not be broken. Besides, the cracks in the rock above the spring water were still there, and the spring water had places to leak out so the pressure would not be too great. Wang Daoyuan replied, don't worry, it's a sure thing. Wang Shui smiled and said, that's good. As long as the Netherworld sect can still hold on for the time being, we have enough time to make preparations. However, if the Netherworld sect could reach an agreement with the other two sects, the other three sects would definitely think of a way to deal with the Guiyuan sword sect. At that time, I'm afraid that they will still recruit the subordinate clans. We have to be prepared. Wang Daoyuan nodded and said, this is to be expected. We can't avoid it. However, to attack Shanbei, in addition to dealing with the Wanling sect and the cruel Sun Palace, we also need to get the agreement of the demons and half-demons. It can't be done in a short time. Wang Daoyuan continued to ask, by the way, after I left, did anything happen to Yun Yi, Gold Wing and Thunder Ape? Also, did anything major happen to the family? Wang Shui replied, your three spirit beasts are quite obedient. Yun Yi and Jin Yi have already reached the second rank and the Thunder Ape is still the same. Yun Yi continued to transport goods and earn some barbecued meat. After its breakthrough, its body grew to about 7 to 8 feet long, and it was so fat that it no longer looked like a tiger. Jin Yi was patrolling the family territory to prevent people from sneaking up on the family business. The Thunder Ape bullied the demons in the Linji mountain area and looked for spiritual herbs and spiritual fruits to make wine. There were three big things in the family. First, the forbidden spirit silk had started to be sold. It could bring in tens of thousands of spirit stones a year, and the income was increasing year by year. The Qing River carp had also started to be sold. However, 80% of the profits were given to the Netherworld sect, so the income was not much. The third thing was that Dao Heng had spent 10 years to finally determine the recipe for the spiritual peach dew wine, and the family had started to expand the planting area of the golden jade peach. After 10 or 20 years, the spiritual peach dew would also become an important business of the family. This is the recipe for the spiritual peach dew, take it. After that, he handed Wang Daoyuan a jade slip. After Wang Daoyuan accepted the jade slip, he said, since there's nothing else, I'll go and see my parents first. I've been away from home for 10 years, so I have to go back and see them. Wang Shui seemed to have thought of something and said, right, a month later is the Yang family's ancestor's 400th birthday. You're also a descendant of the Yang family's ancestor. If you have time, come with me to celebrate. Wang Daoyuan replied, Okay, I'll bring my parents along when the time comes. Right, have you prepared the gift? Our Wang family is the Yang family's most important ally, so the gift can't be light. Wang Shi said, this gift is not easy to give. Although our Wang family has many good things, they're all suitable for business and not suitable to be given as gifts. Wang Daoyuan said with a smile, since that's the case, then leave the gift to me. I have some treasures here that are useful for Zifu realm cultivators. He planned to give some inky jade lotus seeds. For Zifu realm cultivators, although this thing could not repair the soul, it was still useful in increasing the cultivation of divine sense. Inky jade lotus was also planted in the Netherworld sect, but this thing used up too much inchi, so the Netherworld sect did not plant much. It was also not easy for Zifu realm cultivators to exchange for it. After bidding farewell to the three, Wang Daoyuan first cultivated the spirit concealment technique in the cave. He had to hide his cultivation first. It was indeed too conspicuous to wander around with a 5th-level foundation establishment cultivation. 3 days later, he reached the entry level of the spirit concealment technique and successfully suppressed his cultivation to the 4th level of foundation establishment. 10 years ago, he was already at the 3rd level of foundation establishment. Now that he was at the 4th level, it was reasonable. He left Jade Spring Peak and went to Clear Creek Village to visit his parents. An hour later, Wang Daoyuan came to the door of his house and made a noise. Big Black rushed out of the kennel. Seeing that its master had returned, it immediately shook its head and wagged its tail and rubbed against Wang Daoyuan, wanting to get some benefits. This guy was now a high-grade rank 1 demonic beast, equivalent to a human cultivator at the 9th level of Chi Disciple. Big Black was able to obtain the Black Cloud Wolf's approval and looked very similar to the Black Cloud Wolf. It should have quite a bit of the Black Cloud Wolf's bloodline. If the Black Cloud Wolf could become a rank 2 demonic beast, so could Big Black. He took out a storage bag and handed it to Big Black. The storage bag contained a low-grade rank 2 beast blood pill, which was refined from the blood essence of the fierce blood pig and could help spirit beasts advance to rank 2. Big Black was not far from reaching rank 2. In the future, it could lead the wolf pack to guard the family's transit station. It held the storage bag in its mouth and ran back to its kennel. Wang Daoyuan entered the house. This 3-sectioned courtyard was very lively. His eldest brother, Wang Meng, had many children and grandchildren. Today was the 100th day of Wang Meng's first great-grandson, so many family members gathered together. His parents were almost 90 years old and had 5 generations under the same roof. They were all happy that they had become ancestors. Wang Daoyuan entered the courtyard. The family members who came to congratulate him, as well as the descendants of his family, did not dare to breathe loudly. He bowed to his parents and then to his eldest brother and sister-in-law. After that, the others called him second uncle and second grandpa and knelt down. Wang Daoyuan waved casually and said, "You're welcome." Everyone was blown up by a gust of wind. Then he cast a rejuvenation spell that enveloped everyone in the courtyard. His spiritual power had the characteristics of the spiritual fire of life, which was also very beneficial to ordinary people. Everyone felt comfortable all over and their diseases disappeared. They seemed to be 10 years younger. Wang Daoyuan seemed to have discovered something and took over today's main character, his great-grandson who had just reached 100 days old. After using the rejuvenation technique, the others still had a trace of wood attribute spiritual power in them. Only his great-grandson's wood attribute spiritual power had completely disappeared. He held his great-grandson and used the rejuvenation technique again, carefully observing the changes in his great-grandson with his divine sense. He saw that most of the spiritual power that fell on the little guy dissipated, and a very small part was absorbed by the little guy. This little guy should have a wood attribute spiritual root. Even if people with spiritual roots did not cultivate, they would automatically absorb some spiritual power to strengthen their bodies. However, the amount of spiritual power absorbed was very small, and ordinary cultivators would not notice it at all. Wang Daoyuan said with a smile, "Congratulations, big brother. This little guy has a spiritual root and can enter the family's spiritual mountain in the future." Chapter 247. The greatest honor for the ordinary clansmen of the Wang family was to enter the ancestral temple after death and receive incense from the descendants. According to the clan rules, Foundation establishment cultivators and clansmen who made great contributions to the clan could enter the ancestral temple. However, as Wang Daoyuan's collateral relative, Wang Meng could not bask in Wang Daoyuan's glory and enter the ancestral temple after death. If his great-grandson could build his foundation or make great contributions to the clan, he would be able to enter the ancestral temple. Therefore he was very excited. He also had some understanding of cultivation. After hearing Wang Daoyuan's words, he immediately asked excitedly, "How's this child's spirit root?" Wang Daoyuan smiled and said, "This child is too young to test his spirit root. We can only determine that this child has a wood spirit root. Third brother and I can test our spirit roots in advance because of our special physiques. Ordinary people who are less than 10 years old can't test their spirit roots. Wood spirit energy is the most gentle and will not hurt the child. Other spirit energies may hurt him, so we can't use other spirit energies to test him. Big brother, don't worry. With me around, no matter how bad this child's aptitude is, as long as he is willing to work hard, it won't be a problem to build his foundation." He prioritized his cultivation. If Wang Daoyin joined the Divine Weapon Pavilion, it would be hard to say if they could find a Dao companion in the future. Their parents' bloodline could only be passed down by Big Brother's lineage. Helping Big Brother's descendant could be considered as filial piety. After hearing Wang Daoyuan's promise, Wang Meng's face was full of joy. As long as his great-grandson could build his foundation, he would have no problem entering the ancestral temple. After staying at home for a few days, Wang Daoyuan left some spirit grains and went to Linji Mountain to check on the situation there. The 3 spirit beasts had not seen him for 10 years, so he had to comfort them. Yun Yi and Golden Wing were raised by him, so they were less wild. The Thunder Ape was taken in halfway. Apes were especially irritable and easily caused trouble. When he flew near Linji Mountain on his sword, the 3 spirit beasts sensed him and quickly arrived. Golden Wing did not change much except for its cultivation. As a fierce beast, it was very cold. It landed on Wang Daoyuan's shoulder and ate a few pieces of spirit beast meat before flying away to continue its patrol mission. Yuni was more clingy. They hadn't seen each other for 10 years and her entire tiger body had grown bigger. She was about to turn into a ball. If his wings weren't formed by magic, he wouldn't have been able to fly. Seeing that its master had returned, it swooped down from the sky. Wang Daoyuan saw a huge meatball in the air and immediately used earth armor. As soon as the earth armor phantom was formed, the meatball came crashing over. His entire body was sent flying more than 60 meters and he was sent flying together with the meatball. After the man and tiger stopped, Wang Daoyuan was pressed down by Yun Yi, and he had to use the earth escape technique to escape. Looking at Yun Yi's belly that was dragging on the ground, if it wasn't for the fact that she could fly, she wouldn't even have the ability to move. Wang Daoyuan felt that it was time to let it join the battle and lose some weight. After getting a few pounds of barbecued meat from Wang Daoyuan, Yuni went back to her job of earning barbecued meat. The Thunder Ape couldn't fly, so it was the last to arrive. When she saw Wang Daoyuan, she stretched out a hand. Wang Daoyuan handed her a bottle of wine, and she took it and drank it in one gulp. Then she left Linji Mountain and continued her work of collecting the spirit wine recipe. After the 3 spirit beasts left, Wang Daoyuan stayed on Linji Mountain to collect spirit herbs to make spirit peach dew liquor starter. Previously he hadn't fully explored the spirit peach dew liquor starter's recipe, and the spirit fields in the space of the spirit pearl were limited, so he only transplanted golden jade peaches. Golden jade peaches tasted good and were very suitable for recovering spirit energy, but the recovery speed was still not as fast as scarlet blood wine. Therefore he only ate them for fun. Now that he had thoroughly researched the wine recipe and could brew spirit peach dew, he naturally had to plant some spirit herbs to make the liquor starter. With the spirit peach dew liquor, the scarlet blood wine would only be used to heal injuries, so there was no need to plant so many scarlet blood ginseng. There were originally 6 acres of scarlet blood ginseng in the space, but now there was only 1 acre left. Of the 5 acres of spirit fields, blood jiancho and muscle-growing grass shared 1 acre to brew the improved scarlet blood wine. As for the other 4 acres, 3 acres were planted with golden jade peaches, and 1 acre was planted with the spirit herbs in the liquor starter's recipe. The amount of liquor starter used was very small, so he didn't need to plant too many spirit herbs. After transplanting the spirit herbs, Wang Daoyuan went to investigate Fallen Dragon Ridge. In the past he only relied on the reports of the spirit-chasing bees to make judgments, so it wasn't accurate enough. Now that he had cultivated the aura concealment technique, other than hiding his cultivation level, he could also hide his own aura. With this technique he didn't need to worry about being discovered as long as he didn't encounter any demonic beasts with tracking abilities when investigating Fallen Dragon Ridge. After wandering around Fallen Dragon Ridge for more than 20 days, it was time to prepare to celebrate the birthday of the Yang clan's ancestor. He rode Yun-Yi to Qingxi village, picked up his parents and returned to Jade Spring Peak. After Wang Shui was ready, the four of them rode Yun-Yi to the Yang clan's Giantwood Peak. Giantwood Peak was the main spirit vein of the Yang clan. There was a towering poplar tree on the mountain, which was how it got its name. Although the Wang and Yang clans were old friends and had a lot of dealings, Wang Daoyuan had never been to Giantwood Peak. When the four of them arrived at Giantwood Peak, Yang Yulin immediately went to welcome them. The four of them got off Yun-Yi's back and Wang Daoyuan sent Yun-Yi back. After all, they were here to celebrate the birthday. If anyone made Yun-Yi unhappy, it would roar and suppress everyone and it wouldn't end well. The Yang clan's arrangements were very thoughtful. Even Wang Daoyuan's parents were received by someone. The person who received Wang Daoyuan's parents was Madame Yang's childhood playmate. This person was also a cultivator, but his aptitude was poor and he didn't have the qualifications to build his foundation. Wang Daoyuan and the 12th uncle followed Yang Yulin to the hall where the birthday banquet was held. When the two of them arrived at the entrance of the hall, Wang Daoyuan took out a gift box and a gift list and handed it to the Yang clan member in charge of receiving the gifts. In the cultivation world there were two ways to give gifts. One was with a gift list and the other was without a gift list. Without a gift list, it meant that the gift was ordinary and the receiving party didn't need to sing the gift list. If it was with a gift list, it meant that the gift was not ordinary and the receiving party needed to sing the gift list. Of course, if the gift list was not enough, it would also be mocked. The Yang clan member solemnly took the gift and the gift list and sang according to the gift list. Jade Spring Wang Clan 3 Dark Jade Lotus Seeds, 50 Soul Strengthening Pills, 50 Essence Condensing Pills. As soon as this was said, whether it was the Yang clan members or the cultivators who came to congratulate, they were all in an uproar. Although the Dark Jade Lotus Seeds didn't have a significant effect in repairing soul injuries, most of the people whose souls were injured, the injuries were very light. 1 Dark Jade Lotus Seed was enough to almost recover. Moreover, this thing had a very strong effect in improving divine sense and it was useful for Zifu realm cultivators. The Dark Jade Lotus Seeds weren't considered a heaven and earth treasure, but who was willing to give such a precious thing away? Even Wang Shui, who was next to him, was shocked. This wasn't the place to talk and he didn't ask. Yang Yulin quickly reacted and brought the two into the hall to greet Yang Yong. The two entered and after seeing Yang Yong they bowed and said, "Congratulations to Elder Yang, Old Ancestor Yang, on your 400th birthday. I wish Elder Yang, Old Ancestor Yang, to improve your cultivation and see the great Tao of Aura's core soon." Yang Yong smiled, "No need for formalities, please take a seat." After the two were seated, Yang Yulin came to Yang Yong's side with a jade box in his hand. Yang Yong took the jade box, opened it and said, "It really is the Dark Jade Lotus Seeds. Where did the Wang clan get such a treasure?" These lotus seeds were picked nearly a year ago and had been in the space of the Spirit Pearl. It was obvious that they weren't just picked and it was hard to determine the specific year. Wang Daoyuan stood up and cupped his hands, replying to Old Ancestor Yang, "This lotus seed was found by chance when I was traveling in the north of the mountain." Yang Yong asked again, "Where in the north of the mountain?" Chapter 248. A small inky jade lotus seed was able to make Yang Yong lose his composure and forget the rule of not prying into other people's privacy. It seemed that those gold core old fellows of the Netherworld sect were really anxious. Yang Yong was not a native of the Netherworld sect, so the possibility of him knowing the specific situation was not high. The native higher-ups were unlikely to announce the disappearance of the Yin Qi in the Darkwater River. Otherwise, the foreign factions and family factions would definitely have ideas. They were different from the native faction of the Netherworld sect. The native faction and the Netherworld sect were bound together for good or ill. The other two factions were not like this. They could switch to other sects at any time. Their inheritance was also not a direct descendant of the Netherworld sect, so the other sects would not exterminate them. It was probably those gold core cultivators of the Netherworld sect who issued a mission to find the Yin Qi in a roundabout way and promised great rewards. Wang Daoyuan cupped his hands and said, replying to old ancestor Yang, this junior killed a treasure-snatching cultivator more than 10,000 miles north of the Guiyan market. This inky jade lotus seed was obtained from the cultivator who stole the treasure. Hearing this, Yang Yong pondered for a while and said, around 10,000 miles north of the Guiyan market, there is a desert and some sparse grassland nearby. There is only a mirror treasure oasis that can be counted as a good spirit vein. In this case, that treasure-snatching cultivator most likely obtained the inky jade lotus seed in the mirror treasure oasis. After saying this, he realized that he was a little rude and explained, to be honest, a gold core old ancestor in the sect obtained a precious spirit plant that needs to be cultivated with pure Yin Qi. The Yin Qi in the Darkwater River is not pure enough, so a high reward is offered for a pure Yin Qi. If it can be found in the Mirror Treasure Lake, then Daoyuan will take the credit. Wang Daoyuan repeatedly said that he did not dare. This junior only killed a treasure-snatching cultivator and does not dare to take credit. Besides, I don't know if that cultivator obtained the lotus seed near the Mirror Treasure Lake. If we can't find the pure Yin Qi in the Mirror Treasure Lake, I hope old ancestor will not blame us. In addition, according to this junior's knowledge, there is Yin Qi in the profound Yin Spring area. Yang Yong said with a smile, no matter, even if we can't find it, we won't blame you. However, the dark Yin Springs Yin Qi is baleful Yin Qi and is not suitable for growing spirit plants. Wang Daoyuan naturally wouldn't believe this nonsense. The people of the Underworld sect should also know about the disappearance of the profound Yin Springs Yin Qi. Afterwards, Yang Yong said to the guests present, if you can find pure Yin Qi, the gold core stage ancestor will reward you heavily. Everyone agreed in unison. Other than the Liang family, all the families in the north of Qingli County were present. After that, the cultivators of the Yang family began to pay their respects according to their seniority. According to the seniority of the Wang and Yang families, Wang Daoyuan should be Yang Yong's great-great-grandson. Because of him, Wang Fu and Wang Yongshi were supposed to be the 7th generation, but they were arranged to be in the generation of Yang Yong's great-grandchildren. The two old men were the only two ordinary people among the guests. However, no one dared to look down on them. Wang Daoyuan wasn't even 70 years old, but he was already in the middle stage of foundation establishment. It wasn't impossible for him to open the Violet Palace in the future. Moreover, there was also Wang Daoyin, who was accepted as a direct disciple by a gold core stage cultivator with outstanding talent. His Violet Palace was set in stone, and the possibility of him reaching the gold core stage was also very high. The two of them paid their respects together with the foundation establishment cultivators of the Yang family, and their status was even higher than the Qi cultivators of the Yang family. Wang Daoyuan, as Yang Yong's direct descendant, also paid his respects along with Yang Yulin, Yang Yuhu and the other great-great-grandchildren. The Yang family's current seniority was only in the 6th generation. After the Yang family's greetings, the birthday banquet officially began. The guests toasted the birthday boy Yang Yong according to their status. The Wang family had the highest status in the Yang family's camp and was ranked second only to the cultivators sent by the Underworld sect. After the Underworld sect cultivators finished their greetings, Wang Shui stood up and said a few words of blessings before returning to his seat. Next, each family stood up and toasted their guests according to their strength. After the toast, Yang Yong stood up and said, "Today is my 400th birthday and we shouldn't talk about official matters." However, it was rare for everyone to be present, so he decided to make an announcement. I'm sure everyone knows that the Underworld sect and the Savage Sun Palace have been fighting in the West for more than 40 years. Now that the remnants of the Zhou family are causing trouble in the north of the mountain, several gold core stage ancestors have decided to let bygones be bygones with the Savage Sun Palace. With the mediation of the Myriad Spirit sect, the Savage Sun Palace also agreed. But the reason why the two sects were fighting was because of a spirit stone mine. This spirit stone mine stretched for hundreds of miles, and after a simple mining, more than 10,000 spirit stones were mined, of which more than 10% were mid-grade spirit stones. There were also dozens of upper-grade spirit stones. The entire spirit stone mine was worth tens of millions of spirit stones, and the amount of spirit stones produced every year was also hundreds of thousands. But this spirit stone mine was located at the western border of the Darkwater County, and was also the border between the two sections. It was originally discovered by the underworld sect disciples, but the Savage Sun Palace wanted to take it away. Thus the conflict between the two sects was triggered. Now that the conflict was to be stopped, the core issue was how to deal with the spirit stone mine. After a discussion, the Gold Core stage ancestors of the three sects decided to send out 6 batches of cultivators, ranging from early Foundation establishment to late Zifu realm, with 20 people in each batch. They would fight one-on-one according to their cultivation level. Whichever side's cultivators were all defeated would be the winner, and they would obtain 1/6 of the spirit stone mine's output. The sect master's intention was that the cultivators of the subordinate clans could also participate. If you win a match, you will be rewarded with 2,000 spirit stones. If you win 5 matches in a row, you will be rewarded with a Foundation establishment pill. If you win 10 matches in a row, you will be able to choose one of the 3-tier pill, weapon and talisman array inheritances. If there are casualties among the Foundation establishment cultivators, the injured will be compensated with 2 to 10,000 spirit stones, and the dead will be compensated with 30,000 spirit stones. Of course, strength must also be guaranteed. The sect will test the strength of the participants, and only those who pass the test will be able to participate. Spirit stone mines were formed by spirit veins, which produced large amounts of spirit chi to nourish the nearby stones. More and more spirit chi would be stored in the stones, and over time they would turn into spirit stones. There were many factors that affected the quality of a spirit stone. The grade of the spirit vein, the distance between the spirit stone and the spirit vein, and the original quality of the spirit stone could all affect the grade of a spirit stone. The spirit veins in the Immortal cultivation world were not static. New spirit veins were often born and old spirit veins were often exhausted. If a spirit vein existed for a long time, it was possible to leave behind a spirit stone mine. However, even if a spirit vein that had not been exhausted produced a spirit stone mine, no one would be willing to dig out the spirit stones, as that would easily ruin the spirit vein. The spirit stone mine was located at the edge of Darkwater County, which was originally Trinity River County. There were 13 counties in Zhou. After the 3 great sects succeeded in their rebellion, they divided the territory of Zhou. Apart from Trinity River County, the Myriad Spirit sect occupied 5 counties south of the Wanchuan River. Of the 7 counties north of the Wanchuan River, the Netherworld sect occupied 4 and the Crescent Sun Palace occupied 3. Trinity River County was where the former capital of Zhou was located. It spanned the north and south of the river, suppressing several surrounding counties, and its territory was also the largest. Any sect that obtained Trinity River County could easily attack the other 2 sects' nests. Therefore, the 3 great sects divided Trinity River County into 3 parts. The southern part of the river belonged to the Myriad Spirit sect. The northern part of the river, the western part of the Darkwater River Basin belonged to the Crescent Sun Palace, and the eastern part of the Darkwater River Basin belonged to the Netherworld sect. The 4 counties that the Netherworld sect obtained were Qingli County, Heong County, Guangyuan County, and Guanshan County. Guanshan County was located upstream of the Darkwater River, and the Netherworld sect's main gate was in Guanshan County. After the 3 great sects finished dividing the spoils, the Netherworld sect changed Guanshan County to Darkwater County, and incorporated part of Trinity River County into Darkwater County. The other 2 great sects also incorporated Trinity River County into other counties, and the 13 counties of Zhou became 12. You're tuning in to the Zhou Xian's Legacy YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.